Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm going live about now. I knew I was going to stream today, so today was not one of those days that I start with, oh, I didn't expect to be streaming today. But yesterday, I definitely didn't expect to be streaming today until the very evening when I found out that, yes, Geekerwan is in fact posting their annual iPhone and A series chip review. With that, they're also, okay, I was quickly worried because it looked like my stream had problems on my iPad. Seems like it was more of an iPad issue than a me issue. Thank God. So I found out that Geekerwan posted a review, a very in-depth review. Now I'm not sure if I actually want to go through everything in the review. It's a very long one, over a half an hour. It also includes like their own battery review and their own camera stuff, which I'm less interested in because it's a perspective I don't really care about, like in that regard. Like I watch a few big reviewers when it comes to like camera comparisons, not even for my own opinion, but because I know that the photos they take are somewhat representative of what I would take. And then I look at the photos and then I give you my opinion. Then I can also argue through you with them about like their methodology. You know, there are some things that I agree with, for example, with Super Stefan, and disagree with on in the same vein. So um, maybe I'll get to that in the Geekerwan review, but what I definitely care about is their chip testing. To a lesser degree, I also care about like their testing on the new modems, though that is not quite as in depth, of course, as their chip testing, which obviously makes sense just from the just from the nature of the chips at work. We have Riley already in the chat saying, "Bro, surprised because of my thumbnail." Yeah, well, I was actually quite a bit surprised at how certain results panned out in the Geeker van testing. We have hard working joining the chat. Hello to everyone. I'll guess I'll get right to it as quickly as I can now that we have the YouTube jest mostly out of the way. Small recommendation, as always, for you guys to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment live. I love getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements. Hardworking, you're asking, how am I? I'm good. That's the kind of interaction you guys get by chatting with me. You can also support this channel directly through super chats and super stickers. You can also become a channel member right here on YouTube or a subscriber over on Patreon. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, Maximus, and Jonathan, our YouTube MarkTech Pro Max supporters. And shout out to Benveni, our MarkTech Pro Max supporter over on Patreon. That being said, before I get into the really nerdy Apple-related stuff, I would like to go about through, well, not really through. I'm not watching the event. I will probably check out the reviews once the device is actually out there. But Meta, or Facebook, or to be more precise, Mark Zuckerberg's company, presented new Meta Ray-Bans. And the main gist of this new generation is that it has an integrated screen. It's a pretty high resolution screen, or to be precise, it's a high pixel density screen. It has, like, I believe 600 times 600 resolution or something around that, with pixel density very close or even in some ways exceeding the Apple Vision Pro. Again, it depends slightly how you calculate that FOV stuff. It's not quite the same thing as it is on a regular smartphone display, the way you experience it. Plus, of course, this will have to work on fully transparent glass. So, for example, some people point out how this supports like 5,000 nits of brightness and how that will give you supposedly the best HDR experience in the world. No, guys, you need that kind of brightness to make it work like when the glass is fully transparent, because it has to coexist basically with your natural world so that the augmented reality is not entirely lost. We have Rosa joining the chat. Hello to everyone, newcomers and regular watchers alike. Thank you so much for finding me. Today is not going to be as long of a stream as yesterday, but still I think it will be a fun one. And then tomorrow I will be hopefully unboxing my iPhone 17 Pro Max and my AirPods Pro 3. I'll keep an eye out on how exactly I'm gonna do it. I've asked you guys on Discord whether you want the full unboxing or you want me to start the stream once I've actually set up something on the iPhone. I'll look into that. Maybe I'll make like a short about the unboxing, but then put out the actual live stream after I've let the iPhone download a little bit of personal data. But yeah, leave me, by the way, suggestions right now in the chat. And of course, you can leave me chat still afterwards. So if you're not watching live, if you're watching a Savot, which the vast majority still does, I appreciate all input. Yeah. So let's get started with making some fun of Zaki.
Pause WhatsApp video call.
There we go. Uh-oh.
So basically, we have these glasses, right, which work a lot like the previous Meta Ray-Bans. They are now, of course, even more focused on the AI efforts that are happening at Facebook. Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, however you want to call it, right? So he talks a lot to the device, but then he also does some things here. Now, what is he doing? Is he imaginary pinching his nipples because he's so fucking aroused by the presentation he's doing because he thinks he is the most innovative technologist in the history of the planet? No, not. That you're giving to your hand, and it's using that input to understand. Okay, there was a weird noise outside. I got a little bit scared, but it's all good. And it understands basically like pinches, individual finger movements, like tapping in the air and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that, by the way, the Apple Watch does for free, quote unquote. Of course, the Apple Watch is not a free product. So this is why the package is $800. It's not just the glasses, which obviously include like a little bit of a Qualcomm-made processor. They include cameras, microphones, obviously, to deal with that. I think speakers would make sense too, right? I actually didn't have much sense to read into all the tech specs yet. And the actual input method. Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Oh, I apologize. I don't actually know when I muted myself. Man, this positioning of the microphone is really, really going on my nerve. Basically, this wristband is the main input with the glasses together. They combine. They're supposedly pretty low latency, so it's going to be interesting to see how they perform in the real world. And now we're going to see an example of Zaki trying to pick up a phone call on these new glasses using this wristband. Let's check it out.
Well, let's see what happened there. That's too bad. I don't know what happened. Okay, there's the actual video call. All right, I'm just going to pick that up with my neural band.
Oh, it's called a neural band. I apologize. Bye, hardworking. Sorry you couldn't make it for longer.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna make fun of how laggy the UI looks. I'm gonna blame this on just the way the stream is working. Because obviously this is like wirelessly streamed from the glasses, then it has to probably is going through some kind of extra computer that's then uploading it live. I'm not gonna be blaming that on the glasses, but obviously not being able to pick up a phone call is definitely a little bit of a red flag.
What do you think? Let's just go ahead and
pause WhatsApp video call.
All right, try it again. I keep on messing this up.
No, this is the problem. And I've seen a lot of people praise like Zuckerberg for doing live demos because like, oh, things could go wrong. And remember how the iPhone 4 had Wi-Fi issues right during the presentation, and Steve Jobs made everyone in the auditorium turn off the Wi-Fi on like their laptops and stuff like that. You realize that was an actual Wi-Fi problem, right? Like this was something that's the iPhone 4 absolutely was capable of. This is absolutely something that the iPhone 4 was tested on. This is something that the iPhone 4 launched with a pretty good state in. Like, it had its 4G issues, or 3G issues to be more precise back then, but it handled Wi-Fi pretty well. And the main problem with like loading, I believe he was trying to load the New York Times or something like that, wasn't because it looked at that point like either the iPhone couldn't hold a Wi-Fi connection, or like the processor was actually really slow, because at that time loading a website like the New York Times actually was a little bit like a benchmark for smartphones, because it was such a demanding, rich HTML website, right? It was also a statement to, oh, this website doesn't need a flash player, because iPhones don't have a flash player and stuff like that, right? That was actually a problem with the Wi-Fi, because for one, it was 2010, so internet in general was not as good as it is right now, and it was in a giant auditorium with like 50 journalists that were all live connected to the internet to like live chat at least the event, upload photos they were taking. So yes, this failure, look at what he does with his fingers.
Video call.
Like, he's doing everything correctly. If something is not being recognized, it's not actual, like, it's Mark's fault because he's the CEO of the company, but it's not the fault of, like, he's not doing the wrong movement with his hands. Obviously, he's wearing the glasses. Obviously, the phone call is coming in. So it's not an internet issue. It's not a, oh, I'm sorry, guys, I'm messing it up issue. KSP saying, I was just rewatching Dave 2D's video and heard you reacting to it in my mind. Well, yeah, that's living rent-free, baby, rent-free. I'll just imagine if you then ever decide to rewatch the Geekerwan video, because it's going to be such a much more pronounced effect, because if you don't speak Chinese, you're just going to hear me during it. So that's the main input method failing, and now he...
Try it again. I keep on messing this up. And if not, then we'll go for the less fun out option. Okay. I don't know what to tell you guys. All right.
This is a basic feature. This is not, like, remember when the iPhone 10, for example, I'm not showing Apple videos because that's a good way to get the video demonetized, and then YouTube hates recommending it. I've already been completely, like, blacklisted apparently from the algorithm, with many of my videos underperforming completely, so I'm gonna stay a good YouTube citizen for a while. But remember when the iPhone 10 failed with the Face ID demo for Craig Federighi? That was not actually the iPhone 10 failing with Face ID to recognize his face. What had happened was that people who were setting up the iPhones on the stage, right, while they were moving them around, connecting them to chargers and everything to make sure that everything just works, they accidentally, of course, kept looking on at those devices, and Face ID thought, oh, that's a good opportunity for me to try unlocking myself, right? People are looking at the screen. I'm seeing that in Face ID under my 3D sensor and whatever, right? My depth sensor. And because those people were not Craig Federighi, because it was not their face configured into Face ID, that's why one of the iPhones on stage refused to actually put in Face ID, right? And when he tried out another iPhone, it immediately worked, because as we all know, Face ID works, and over the year it has gotten even better, but not at the basic, not at holding it up in portrait mode and seeing you. That had to work day one, and that was the case. He is showing an even more basic feature, basically a basic tap. And remember when, and this is now going to be very Apple nerdy, remember when Steve Jobs prank called Starbucks during the original iPhone event in 2007? And he was like, 3,000 lattes to go, please, right? Imagine if him going to the Maps app, and then clicking on the number, and then the phone app springs up. Imagine if at any step of the process this had failed entirely. This would have been less bad than what you're seeing here, because at that point at least it's like an actual app failing or whatever. This is failing the more basic interaction of just tapping a confirm. So I don't know why I'm clicking on mute, why I'm muting myself. I'm just gonna move my microphone further away from me. This new position, I'm gonna change it up for tomorrow's stream, because this is clearly not working, unfortunately. Imagine if like the iPhone, the original iPhone, couldn't scroll, right? Like, what was the big selling point of the multi-touch UI? How smooth it is, how easy the input works and everything, right? That would be comparable to this. But to add insult to injury, not only did this demo fail twice, but there's actually another demo that failed during the same event, just minutes apart, basically.
What do you think? Maybe let's make, I don't know, what should we make? Maybe like a steak sauce, maybe Korean-inspired type thing, you know, just to show.
I hate the fact that everything people post these days is this bullshit, like, tall format, but okay.
What the live AI is like.
So, live AI, again, this is now a feature that we are not just talking, this is something that can fail more, right? We all acknowledge that AI is not perfect. It will be sometimes weirdly opinionated. It sometimes will make strange decisions. That being said, we are now looking at the main input method of this device, because while it has a screen, it's not really like designed for you to look at the screen and like zoom into websites or whatever. It only has a screen on like one of the glasses, so you're more like the Monopoly man or whatever looking into it. But now the basic voice assistant will fail at a task that they have pre-chosen for this event. Listen.
Yeah, let's try it. It's not something I've made before, so I could definitely use the help. Hey Meta, start live AI.
Starting live AI. I love the setup you have here with soy sauce and other ingredients. How can I help?
Hey, can you help me make a...
First of all, I hate when AI gets overly friendly, when it wastes time on like, oh, I love the setup. I know that some people actually prefer it. But I hate that. I hate AI wasting my time and talking back too much. This is why half of my conversations with ChatGPT involve me telling ChatGPT to at some point just shut up. But that's not the point. Now we're looking at the actual interaction. Okay, one compliment. The AI through the cameras actually recognized the ingredients on here, and now she or it, whatever, is asking, what do you basically want me to tell?
Korean-inspired steak sauce for my steak sandwich here?
You can make a Korean-inspired steak sauce using soy sauce, sesame oil.
What do I do
brown
first?
sugar.
What do I do first?
Riley broke out the German efficiency. The German efficiency of what? No, first of all, I'm not German. Oh, yeah, I understand what you mean. You mean because I don't like... No, I don't. I love talking to humans. I do it at work. I do it with my friends. I call my grandma sometimes 2 times a day because she like listens to more obscure like Russian-speaking news that I'm not informed in, and I'm a terrible reader when it comes to Russian. And I discuss stuff with her. I love talking to people. I love wasting time on talking, but not to an artificial bullshit thing that's like that's gonna give me a recipe. At this point, first of all, I never want a recipe without options, right? I just want to open the screen, whether it's on my phone or my tablet or even something like the Home Hub Mini or whatever these bullshit devices are called, right? That I put right in my kitchen for $150 and whatever. It's always there. Maybe I pre-save some recipes on it. It has a designated UI. It has a decently fast chip. It doesn't run out of battery potentially. It's not something that's gonna fall into my fucking soup while I'm cooking because it's a thicker and heavier glasses. No, I love talking, but not to this.
You've already combined the base ingredients.
Okay, so now this is why, by the way, this is funny to me because I think people who are saying, oh, look, they did live demos. Look how brave they are. Look at how much better they are than Apple's pre-recorded events. Did you notice what she said? She said you already mixed the ingredients. Is that part of the pipeline of responses that was planned here, that was pre-programmed? And she basically told him a wrong part of the pipeline? Because this is not how AIs work, right? If they get something wrong like this, usually asking them something again will result in them trying to course correct. Even ChatGPT, like first, right? At this point, if I call it 4.0, I think it would be like mistaken with 4.0 and shit like that. But like even ChatGPT from like 18 months ago was able to like course correct. Does it mean it then automatically found the right response all the time? No, of course not. But look at how insistent the assistant here actually
So
is.
now grate a pear to add to the sauce.
What do I do first?
First of all, that's terrible, like technical know-how. Why is he saying the same thing again? Is that because that was pre-programmed? Because at that point, if the AI is fully live and doing all the things the AI is supposed to do, wouldn't you say, no, I think you got something wrong. Look, I've done nothing yet, right? That's the natural interaction that even I do with ChatGPT. Like recently, I had like a conversation with ChatGPT about a history book that I read, and I let it analyze it from the perspective of the actual underlying historian. I made it compare it to other contemporary historians who wrote similar works but might have disagreed in other ways. And at no point did I try the same input twice because like ChatGPT refused to do what I asked. At that point, I course corrected. I asked it something else. So this leads me to believe that this was not designed to actually be fully live.
You've already combined the base ingredients, so now grate the pear.
You see, this is unnatural for AI. And yes, I know AI in of itself is unnatural. But what you're seeing here is really, really suspicious in my opinion.
And gently combine it with the base sauce.
All right, I think the Wi-Fi might be messed up.
Okay, so this has absolutely nothing to do with the Wi-Fi. This is an absolute lie. And this is why I hate people praising this event for how authentic and live it is. When Wi-Fi failed on the iPhone 4, it was because the Wi-Fi in the actual room was super busy because there were 50 journalists. Sometimes, as you guys know from your own home, internet is not always 100% predictable. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slower, sometimes it's super low latency, sometimes it's higher latency, sometimes it's more your Wi-Fi that's fast, basically as fast as your Ethernet connection. Sometimes it's drops into 1/10 of the speed of your Ethernet connection, especially if you have many devices on the same network. This is not that. AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Google Gemini or hell, Siri, because she's obviously baked into the device, they will tell you, oh, I have trouble, or even better, I have trouble connecting to the internet, or it looks like your connection is slow. Can you try again later even, right? If it's a good AI that actually knows about its limitations. So trying to blame this on AI, and before that, Zaki trying to blame it on himself messing up.
All right, try it again. I keep on messing this up.
That it has nothing to do with that. This is actually, and the reason why I'm complaining, if this was a product that was like launching next summer, right? They were like, look, this is our most ambitious project yet. It relies on AI that's not yet released. It's relying on screen technology that's some of the most advanced in the world. Here we even had to create a full-on new accessory for it that has never been done before. Guys, please treat this as like basically as like a freshly I'm not trying to be vulgar, but like treat it as like basically a zygote, right? Like it needs another 8-9 months in the oven, right? No, this device is launching at the end of the month. It's launching on the 30th of September. It's 2 weeks away. It's less than 2 weeks away. This is embarrassing. Even when after the original iPhone was shown, it even took a little while after that, but even then, that was still a device that actually nailed all its demos. So no, if you're gonna dick right for this demo being live, first of all, some of it seemingly wasn't that live as it seems, and the other things is you're being lied to about why these demos actually failed. So this is a criticism and an opportunity for laughter. Obviously, this device is actually interesting because we know, for example, Apple is working on something similar. So it's $799. Again, it includes the screen. I'm not gonna open up any like promotional videos. I don't know if there's licensed music in it. So this is basically the screen in it. High resolution, supposedly pretty bright. Supposedly only 2% light leakage. So while somebody could probably see when they're standing right in front of you that, oh, the screen is active, it's most likely not going to be so bright that that it's actually distracting, or that they might even see what's on your screen. What's a little bit worse is that the battery here, for one, you have to charge your glasses, and you have to charge your neural band, and your neural band gets you up to 18 hours of battery life, and it has IPX7 water rating. So not the best, but probably okay. But then the actual glasses, which again feature the 600 by 600 pixel display at 90 Hz refresh, anywhere from 30 to 5000 nits. Content refreshing at 30 Hz is a tiny bit concerning to me. They're using Qualcomm Snapdragon AR1 Gen 1. I have no idea how performant this is. I have no idea what the third-party app selection is going to be. But even worse is the battery life of the actual device, and that is 6 hours. So it's not a full workday device. It's not even close. This is different from a watch that, again, will not have an impact on your day-to-day life while you're wearing it. These are glasses. Some of you will have to use it with like prescription glasses, lenses in them. I know some people at that point will say, well, if you like the subscription like the lenses, they will still work after the display goes dim and everything. Like, yeah, but this device is basically pitched as like a smartphone alternative. Like, if it's not, then it's not worth $800, and because it just doesn't do like stuff that's really not very smartphone-y. Like, at least an Apple Watch, right? It records your workouts. It has notable health and fitness sensors. That's stuff that your iPhone doesn't do. And then, of course, it can go crazy like an Apple Watch Ultra and give you like measuring how deep you dive to a crazy extent. Obviously, that's not something your smartphone does. What does this do that your smartphone couldn't do with a quick pan of it? GamerLife456X, do you have iPhone 17? We're still 1 day away from it. I actually got my confirmation that both my iPhone 17 Pro Max and my AirPods Pro 3 are getting shipped. Well, they are already being shipped, but they are arriving tomorrow. And speaking of my iPhone 17, I actually got another accessory for it because I was actually too stupid to cancel this order. So I might actually just try it out and tell you guys how good this works. So this is, I apologize for this being wet. I put it right next to my water bottle. This is Corning made glass, so that is why I ordered it. I know ESR makes decent protective glasses for iPhones, but usually they advertise like 7 to 9 times the hardness. So here here they're saying it's 10 times. And also a 25% reduction in scratch visibility. So this one also advertises, but for some reason not on the actual package, that this is very low reflective. And I want to test out if that is actually correct. Now, I also ordered the protective glasses from Taurus, protective glass from Taurus, and that's because that one actually advertises like a sub 1% reflection rate or something crazy like that, basically in the realm of like almost like a privacy cover, but still being fully transparent. So I might actually put them side by side, because now I have both, and I don't think I'll be sending those back to Amazon. That's unnecessary hassle for me. Yeah, so this is the device. Again, it's nothing crazy. They are working on new features. So again, like even something like EMG based handwriting. So that way you just sit down, because it understands how your hand moves so well. It understands what you're writing down. I struggle with understanding why any of this is important. But okay, 12 megapixel camera, 3x digital zoom, which probably is going to be pretty crappy. Photo capture default is 3024 by 432. That's pretty standard for a 12 megapixel image. And it's what is it? A 3x2 1080p video, basically 1920 by 1080 at 30 FPS. Yeah, I'll show you guys, of course, the iPhone 17 tomorrow when I unpack it. Mark being so humble, I'm sorry for this being wet. Who would have noticed that? Well, I actually don't know. Wouldn't that have been like super reflective down below? It was pretty wet. I was actually worried for like a second. But yeah, I try to maintain a high quality, right? This is a very basic streaming setup. I'm not even having like an extra monitor. I'm just putting my iPhone over my laptop and streaming for you guys for 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. I did get a decent microphone and everything. And I moved actually my office chair to the living room here in the corner. But if I mess up something, I'll tell you. Like if I mute myself an accident because I'm a fucking moron, if I accidentally mess up some of the accessories I'm presenting to you, of course you guys deserve some quality time. It's not expected that you spend your time with me live, especially. So yeah, I take this as a very important responsibility. So these are the Meta Ray-Ban glasses with a screen now. Again, you can do your own research into them, because I would love to know actually certain things, like the display is clocked at 90 Hertz with content refreshing at 30 Hertz. Kind of sounds crappy to me. I actually criticized Apple Vision Pro for being 90 Hertz. Or like, was it 100 hertz or something like that? But like, that was the actual refresh rate, also of the content on screen. So I assume this is doing like 90 hertz, but in order to like clean the panel almost from the input of like basically 30 FPS, this would be horrible. And this would be basically relegating this device to very, very basic usage, because I don't think anything else would be very enjoyable. I'm actually fine with how clunky the glasses are. They could be worse, but then again, they only have 6 hours. So I guess there are some things still to criticize here. Yeah, but that's about it for some Zaki stuff in the beginning. There is more news in the world of technology. Most notably, Nvidia is investing $5 billion in Intel common stock, and they're also doing like some server partnerships and whatever. So they announced a collaboration to jointly develop multiple generation of custom data center and PC products that accelerate applications and workloads across hyperscale enterprise and consumer markets. Basically, what's important here, despite years of kind of hating each other, Nvidia Nvidia to probably appease the Trump administration, who has recently taken a 10% ownership in Intel, now is basically forcing other companies to invest in Intel, probably to prop up their own investment. So that's why this is happening. This is basically socialism for big companies. Congratulations, I guess, Intel, for kind of being even more bailed out of your own troubles than even the US car companies were under Obama. But yeah, I would be very happy at Intel here. Like, hey, socialism rules if you are the benefactor of it. Gamer Life saying, check your calendar. How would I check my calendar? No. What the fuck are you talking about? The iPhone is not coming until the 19th. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let me actually give you something more. Like, if you live in Australia or something like that, where it might be already the 19th, well, congratulations. Well, if I don't need to check my calendar, I can just move my face away and show you that, yes, in fact, it's still the 18th of September at 5:35 p.m. That's what you guys see over here. And now we can actually get back to business. And yes, this is the main topic of the video, the Geekerwan iPhone 17. They call it the iPhone 17 series performance review because they review both the base model and the Pros. I assume not the Air yet, because the Air has like this problem to launch on the market in China because it's eSIM only, and China doesn't like that. So, but we are going to get something about the entire iPhone 17 series, which of course includes looking into the base A19 chip and the professional A19 Pro.
今年的 iPhone 评测来了。
Okay, as always, I need subtitles while watching Geekerwan.
今年的 iPhone 可以说是
And I think this is one of the videos that I actually shouldn't be watching at 1.25, maybe at 1.1.
这几年以来变化。
So, the generation with the biggest changes in recent years, it depends really how you look at it. The way they test, I'm not surprised, and the way what they focus on, I'm not surprised that those are their findings, or at least their conclusions. That being said, I still think that, like, obviously introducing ray tracing for the first time on the A17 Pro and the first generation of dynamic caching was a big deal. Switching to 3nm, the A17 Pro is a pretty good chip. First time 8 gigabytes. Gamer Life saying you subscribe to my channel. Well, thank you so much. Doing the YouTube jazz, as we call it, jazz hands. Subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, super chatting. All of that. And then, of course, the A18 was a pretty big CPU improvement, higher clock speeds, higher efficiency due to N3E, but also new technologies like scalable matrix extensions as part of the latest ARM instruction set, plus Apple custom stuff building on top of that. But yes, if we're especially focused on gaming, there's quite a lot of stuff here, from faster memory and therefore more memory bandwidth to better sustained performance thanks to a much more modern cooling system, especially on the Pro models. Larger amounts of cache, whether it's L2 cache to benefit the efficiency of the E-cores, or a larger system level cache that benefits basically every component, but will be especially beneficial in games. I always like to note, cache is basically bandwidth, so this is why sometimes Apple doesn't like using the fastest memory, because that consumes more energy, while using more cache usually improves your IPC and increases your efficiency. So if you ever wonder why doesn't Apple utilize the fastest memory right away, well, that's because they're probably waiting for a more efficient version of that same spec on a newer node, or just like with some new algorithm of memory compression and things like that. So plenty of stuff happening, but I would argue the reason why they're so excited is because they have been downplaying the success of the A9, of the A18 and the A17. I've disagreed with some of their methodology. I will disagree with some of the methodology today, but I still give them massive kudos for doing as much testing as they do, as in-depth testing as they do. So let's continue.
最大的一代了。即便是不讲宛如超级 Apple Touch 的 iPhone Air 啊，那标准版呢这次也违背祖宗决定，用上了高刷。Pro 系列更是终于用上了 VC 均热板，看齐安卓旗舰啊。
Again, it does not simply match it. It like laser welds it into the aluminum unibody, meaning it actually has a lot more thermal mass than most Androids. But okay, let's continue.
这简直不像是苹果的风格。
It is Apple style. If like, I think a lot of people misunderstand because, like, for example, Tim Cook did like that stupid interview where he claimed Apple invented vapor chambers. He didn't say it in as many words, but he basically said, "Look, we have this technology that basically traps liquid, and liquid turns into gas and transports the heat, and then the gas cools down and it becomes liquid again, and on and on and on, right?" And yeah, he made it sound like Apple invented it. But then again, the specific implementation of the vapor chamber on the Pros is unique by combining, well, it's not unique in the largest scheme of things, right? Because obviously it's best to combine a cooling system like a vapor chamber with a metal chassis than it is glass. Or when you're connecting it to metal, it's certainly better to connect it to aluminum than it is to connect it to titanium or stainless steel. But just saying, like, sometimes Apple will say weird things. Sometimes Apple will not focus on the pros and the nerds as much as we would all like. The enthusiasts watching this channel, the people really trying to go in depth with everything. But Apple is still Apple. Apple still has tremendously qualified engineers. Apple still does a lot of work to innovate. Let's continue.
但在发布会上 ，A19 系列的处理器似乎没有太多的介绍啊，这是不是意味着它只是挤了一袋牙膏呢？
What? How much? Like, you realize that Apple does an event for iPhones, AirPods, and Apple Watch at the same time, and then with iPhones they have the base model, the iPhone Air, the Pro and Pro Max. Even with the Apple Watch, they have like the SE, the Series 11, the Ultra 3. And with AirPods, they have like the actual AirPods to talk about, the audio features, the health features now. Like with iPhone, they also have to mention iOS 26 because that's the main thing that's also gonna drive a lot of turnover this year. In what world would they spend like tens of minutes during the event talking about the A19? Like, they mentioned it. They even mentioned things like more last level cache and more cache specifically for the E-cores. They gave some super nerdy details. They talked about the vapor chamber. They brought up the N1. They brought up the C1X modems that they're now doing in-house. Yeah, like, how much more do you actually want?
哎呀，这个你往下看就知道了。这一代的 A19 系列绝对值得我跟你们好好说道说道。那这期视频呢，我们就从能效曲线、核心架构、散热实测、游戏性能、续航能力、影像升级等几个方面来帮你好好了解一下这代。
Yeah, so image upgrade. So that's like, I don't care about that. Like, I'll be watching. I think by the time we hit like their camera comparison stuff, I would just like to transition to Super Staff. Also, might I mention that this is now the second Chinese smartphone reviewer channel that, including yesterday's Xiao Buys with Xiao Buys Tech, which we quickly checked out yesterday, but it didn't have English subtitles. Might I mention that all of them are adopting this liquid glass aesthetic, where like they clearly don't have the rendering expertise of Apple, because even pre-rendered, this is not liquid glass. This is just frosted glass, and then outside slightly liquidy with like I guess with a little bit of refraction. I guess they use like a slightly curved glass in like Blender or something like that for this effect. Or maybe they just went with Figma, which Figma incorporates a lot of liquid glass stuff nowadays. They did it pretty quickly after WWDC. But yeah, apparently like Chinese YouTubers are very much all in on liquid glass.
iPhone 的实际表现，我可以提前宣布啊，这一代 iPhone 就是继 iPhone 13系列以后，接下来几年最强的 iPhone 钉子户。那么
I'm sorry, what?
就是继 iPhone 13系列以后
Strongest iPhone nailer in the next few
接下来几年
years after
最
the
强的
iPhone 13 series. I assume they mean it's one of the bigger upgrades since the iPhone 13 series.
那么话不多说，
Which this is like the green that was introduced in the iPhone 13 Pro, like in the spring refresh. Is that because ProMotion was introduced? Or is it because there was a lot of new stuff on the A15 chip in that regard. Over like the A14, but still, like, it's definitely a bigger upgrade than the A16 was the year later. But was it as big as like the iPhone 15 with the A17 chip?
正式开始。这次的 A19 系列使用了台积电
And
N3P 工艺
3P,
制造
true.
CPU
As is also the case for the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 and the Dimensity 9500.
GPU 的核心数量
It's also very likely that these chips are larger than before. Now, N3P does have higher density, but some of the changes, like, and we'll later get to like the wider decode for the E-cores, the larger amount of L2 cache, the larger amount of system level cache, the dual issue FP16 compute pipeline for the GPU, the neural accelerators. Honestly, yeah, this suggests that they're very much using a larger chip.
前代保持不变，所以我们呢直接来看它的性能表现啊。所有对比的机型，强制散热下的 Geekerwan
Okay, what they mean by forced cooling is they're basically combining it with fan, or you can even Sorry, how did I mean again? I did not even touch it. Jesus Christ, I hate this microphone positioning. I changed it for like the unboxing stream because it would be too much in the way. Thank you, KSB, by the way. Thank you. Yeah, but I even have the light in front of me. But I guess I should put it away. This is horrible design, by the way. Sure, like putting just a touch surface on your microphone that can be touched by your lips and everything. It's Riley commenting, peace and quietness. Shut up. Shut up. You don't send enough super chats to be that snarky. Thank you, guys. And sure, do better. This was the latest microphone they had. I liked the fact that previously it was like real buttons and everything on the MV7. But then I thought, well, the MV7 Plus gotta be better. I'm such a moron.
16里面呢
What I was gonna say, you are gonna get the 4,000 points, not just under forced cooling, not only under liquid nitrogen cooling. You're also gonna get it just if your device is not heat soaked, and of course, if you got a little bit lucky in the silicon lottery. A lot of the testing seems more to suggest like 3,900 points. With the Snapdragon 8 Elite, this actually matters. Gamer Life saying, relax, chat. Riley saying, you're not my benefactor. Bitch! I'm gonna slap the shit out of you in Discord later on. What do you mean? But this actually, I would fight about that result because I have hard problems, especially outside the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, which is higher clocked than the rest of the 8 Elites. I have a hard time finding results for the 8 Elite that are higher than 3,100. And the reason why, by the way, I'm saying that the cooling is not that important here is because on my A17 Pro, I can get roughly like 2920, 2930. So we are very much talking about like margin of error when it comes to when it comes to like Silicon Lottery, and I get about like 7,500-ish points in multi-core. KSP saying, do you think the refractions and glassy effects in iOS 26 use the GPU or the CPU to render? I actually would be interested to know. It could be either, knowing Apple. I think GPU probably makes more sense, just because I think that these effects are a little bit too advanced. In the way, I think this would be actually the case where loading them on the CPU might actually be less efficient than turning on the GPU for once. But I couldn't tell you. Riley saying, all I know is they use a lot of battery. Well, I mean, you guys will have to give me your impressions after like a week or so. I haven't granted, I've been on betas now for 3 months, but I'm doing fine in terms of battery.
最高频率4.25G 赫的 A19 Pro 直接跑出了。
So 4.25, that's interesting. I've seen 4.22. Did this overclock itself because it was basically actively cooled? I couldn't tell you.
单核4019，多核11054的恐怖成绩啊，成为了第一款单核突破4000分的处理器。不仅仅是局限于手机处理器啊，这是目前所有已知。
No, it's not. This is lower than the maximum performance on the M4 Max, which delivers up to 4050, 4060.
处理器里单核最高的成绩，它也已经超过了自家的 M4 系列。
This is the base M4. M4 never even got that 4,000 for most people. It maxed out at around 3,800. This is actually, again, and this is similar for the 8 Elite, this is actually where cooling does benefit the chip a
多么搭载
little.
的 A19 处理器的单。
Okay, so I thought they had tested the M4 Pro and M4 Max. I'm surprised.
核也超过了
How about this 11:59 p.m. everyone will wake up at 12 a.m. and then they can go and buy a free iPhone 17. Yeah, that's not happening. but hey, you're free to send me a free one. Guys, the benefits of MagSafe on the Mac. I just stepped on the cable and guess what? It just cleanly ripped off because of the magnets. Didn't hurt my laptop, didn't even move it in the slightest. So, guess I got saved by an Apple innovative feature.
800分，多核10307分啊。相比较于前代，两者的单核提升了10%左右，多核提升在15%左右。那从峰值成绩来说，这代 CPU 呢算是稳步提升啊。那么能效呢
？And again, don't forget that these are all improvements happening on a very similar node. Like N3P is better than N3E, which is better than N3B, sure, but we're still not talking even like a full 60% all of the way to like a new node. Like we're talking at best like a 15% combined improvement from the node, maybe 20, which is obviously like given that you're also doing here high scale down. Especially thanks to I have no idea. I think that was that my lips? Do my lips get closer to it? Is it my nose? Is my nose so big? I thought I had muted myself for a moment again. But basically the impact was that Riley saying we expect a 4.45 gigahertz clock speed to get less than this. Well, I mean, yeah, the M4 generation, the A18 generation has lower IPC, so it makes sense that it roughly evens itself out. But the results, the 4.2 gigahertz here that's actually matching is not 4.4 gigahertz from the M4. It's matching the 4.5 gigahertz from the M4 Pro and M4 Max.
不会是靠萌萌超频干出来的吧？这我们就必须来看看 A19 系列在能效曲线上的问题。
Okay, so these are numbers that are gonna be very important to evaluate through the correct perspective. They do not have, and this is something that I'm trying to explain to people, even though, yes, you can see that they're still the most efficient chips here. They do not have the same firmware level control over iPhones as they do on Androids. On Android devices, they can actually isolate the chips because they have the code to do so. On the iPhone, what they're getting is the board power. This is not the power of just the chip. From everything I understand, given their testing limitation, and this is not their fault, this is the fault of iOS, but basically when they're seeing full chip performance, they're also seeing the memory and the board, of course.
那现在的 iPhone 已经不能有根越狱了。
iPhones can be
所以呢，我
rooted,
们
so we
也只
can
能测
only
两个。
measure 2 frequency points. So this is why the A17 Pro is the last graph.
至少 A19 系列这2个点的能效，毫无疑问的干掉了所有前代的旗舰处理器啊！尤其是 A19 Pro 这个11000伏的峰值成绩是在12瓦的主板。
Motherboard power draw. So again, not fully comparable results to how they test the Snapdragon 8 Elite and the 9400. So A18 Pro are comparable here with A19 and A19 Pro because they're using the same methodology. Or at least the same source of results. This is not the case for the 8 Elite and the D9400.
功耗下跑出来的，并没有像安卓旗舰那样上拔到超过16瓦，所以 A19 Pro 的能效非常漂亮，相比于去年的各家旗舰都有明显的代际提升。那 A19 的峰值功耗和性能呢，都比 A19 Pro 低啊，但依然是一人之下万人之上的水平。不知道
So here we are seeing some confirmations of things we've already seen before. So the previous generation obviously is using 7500 megatransfers per second memory. Even the base A19, I actually almost expected it to be using 7500, but it's actually using 8533. And the A19 Pro uses on the Pro chips 9600, and then it's using 8533 on the A19 Pro inside the iPhone Air, which obviously has like 1/6 fewer GPU cores, so it doesn't need quite as much bandwidth. And by what I assume is still using 9600 megatransfers, this is not confirmed, this is my theory, but then underclocking it a little bit, by a little over 10% actually, in that case, it's getting a lot of efficiency back. Which of course makes sense on the iPhone Air, which doesn't have the cooling system of the Pros, doesn't have the batteries of the Pro. Makes sense.
今年高通和发哥的旗舰能不能再给我们来点惊喜呢？看到这样的能效提升啊，我就很好奇它的 P 核和 E 核到底做了什么，它们又分别提升有多大，架构又有什么样的进步？那我们现在就直接搬出行业标准测试工具。
So, Spec CPU 2017, this is the first thing I really take an issue with. Now, do I have a problem in general with using Spec 2017? No. Especially in prior years when Spec 2017 was still somewhat up to date, or at least it wasn't too outdated. But Spec 2017 got like one update by the company who makes it to support reduced instruction set architectures, right? And it was never ported actually to iPhone, iPad. I don't think there's actually even an official Android port. So this is them custom porting this. But even more importantly, they're not even doing like an actual app in the App Store. They're just like side loading this, I assume through like Xcode or something like that. So this is a test that hasn't been updated for 3 years, has never been officially optimized for the systems you're testing, and has absolutely zero new tools to test, which are becoming much more important, like SME acceleration, basically a lot of AI acceleration that's currently being built into CPUs and GPUs. And I know some of you might say, well, but I want a raw test, one that does not include AI or anything. But that's not really representative of your everyday workflow. It's not just Siri Apple Intelligence that uses AI on your device, but understanding what's in your photos is AI. Potentially summarizing a web page for you is AI. Word recommendation while you're typing, grammar correction, a lot of that these days is being done on AI. And even when you're just dictating a message, not for actual audio, but for it to be written down, that's now running through AI algorithms. Most of the tasks will probably be able to fit into the neural engine. Sometimes they will have to be shared between like the GPU and the A&E. Sometimes they'll just straight up run on the CPU because you don't want to move the cache around between all the parts. And the CPU is plenty fast enough for certain low-level AI tasks. So yeah, Spec 2017, as the name suggests, is outdated. And if you know all the details, it's not great. Plus, it is unfortunately also combined with their inability to disconnect board testing from individual core testing or even just the SoC as a whole.
Spec CPU 2017，来看看新 CPU 有几成功力。
Also, Spec 2017, and shout out to Jimmy James who told me that on our Discord, which is that Spec apparently takes like hours to run, up to like 8 hours. So I'm not sure if this is a test that they like reran several times to account for certain issues. And this is also where we're gonna find what I will consider the first mistake in the video. But let's first get to the good stuff.
A19 Pro 的 P 核到底有多强啊？
Oh no, this is actually the bad stuff. Okay, we're starting with the analysis of the P core, right? Which you can see gets decently faster from 10.63 to 12.11, but it actually increases its power consumption by 20% roughly, right? To go from 6.14 to 7.4. This is bullshit, and this is where their inability to disconnect it from the board becomes so crucial, because this most likely is utilizing the faster memory to feed such a task where you compare integer and floating point performance. And the reason why actually really I have some proof here, and this is actually the results of the P cores of the A19 versus the A19 Pro. And specifically here in floating point, not in integer performance, you see that the results are basically identical. From 17.13 to 17.37, we're looking at literally like a 1% difference or whatever, right? Wait, sorry. 17.37 divided by 17.13. Yeah, it's 1.4%. But when you then look at the power consumption increase, right? Now you're looking at 10.07 divided by 8.89. I believe this is a 13%. Wait, did I use the right numbers? Yes. This is a 13% increase in power consumption for 1% higher performance. So what you're basically seeing is not the performance of the actual core, but of course the core likes faster memory, I'm not denying that. But what you're most likely seeing here is that the A19, which connects to 8533 megahertz memory, which is clocked quite a bit lower than 9600, this is the difference between the memory power consumption, at least in my opinion. Like, obviously we can talk about the overall motherboard, but in this scenario, this is the most likely culprit here. I don't think storage is much to blame here. I don't think that suddenly we are measuring the power consumption of the Wi-Fi or the 5G modem. I think we are measuring the difference of the memory, and this is why you get like this very predictable improvement increase across the board from 6.34 to 7.4. That's what, 1.06 watts. Here you're getting like 1.2-ish watts. This is the difference between the memory, and this I've seen some people use these results to claim that the A19 Pro P core is less efficient than the A18 Pro P core. You can actually see that, going from 7500 to from 8533 to 7500, that has like an impact of like 700 megahertz. Yeah, that's slower memory. 1 watts for the higher memory. It's not just the memory, it's also the packaging of the overall chip. But yes, these numbers on the high end, when you're actually fully utilizing the memory, which Spec 2017 does to feed that task onto every part of the chip to maximize the cache, to maximize the internal bandwidth. This is, which is very much what integer and floating point are all about. Yes, is it exactly 1 watt specifically from the memory, or is it 1 watt because of the package power that you associate between the memory and the rest of the motherboard as it's configured for the A19 versus the A19 Pro? It's the latter. but we are seeing pretty understandable differences here. So. But otherwise, how do you explain it, right? Where is the extra power coming from? Are you just saying that, oh, this is randomly running like a higher voltage? What for? For better stability on a single core? Like for better maintaining that power? That's not how Apple configures their chips. Even if we acknowledge that they would give it like maybe a higher voltage to better deal with the higher clock speeds, at that point you would see higher performance gains.
在小幅提升0.2吉赫的情况下啊，那么 A19 Pro 比起 A18 Pro 整数成绩提升了14%，浮点成绩提升了9%，综合提升幅度呢是11%左右，和 Geekerwan 6的单核提升幅度一致啊。那如果我们对比 IPC 的话，它的整数提升了8%，浮点提升了4%，综合提升6%。显然啊，这个 P 核架构是有升级的，但并不是那种革命性的变化。那我们
No, and it was never going to be a revolutionary change just because of the node stuff. I know some people will always point out the A18 and DM4, but this goes really beyond just like for one, N3B had some other issues. The A17 Pro was a mishmash of somewhat delayed technologies. It's a great chip because Apple's underlying technologies are still great, even if some of them get delayed or whatever, or some of them turn out to be a little bit less efficient than one would have hoped. But the A17 Pro was just a tiny bit underwhelming if you just take the highest possible expectations for the jump from 5 nanometer to 3 nanometer, even if you look at the GPU changes. Here, you're just seeing a chip with more cache, you're seeing a chip with faster memory, and you're seeing a chip that clocks even a little bit higher, plus some IPC gains, again, probably mostly due to those cache changes. So yeah, to me, all of this makes sense. It's not a revolutionary change. It doesn't have to be quite honest.
待会儿也会来逆向分析一下它的架构到底做了什么样的优化。
Yeah, you saw... Hey Siri, stop. You like saw the efficiency, right, in Geekbench that they've shown here, right? Like, I know the E-cores are getting more efficient, but do you really think that that would be possible? Especially with the higher efficiency here of the A19 Pro. If the P-cores were suddenly 10% less efficient? No, that's not how it works. Like, the E-cores are better on the A19 Pro than the A19. Not denying that because of the L2 cache, but you would not get the difference. At best, you would get both of them like equalizing.
目的啊，但依然是
And you can see that they're very close to that. Like the A19 Pro is a little bit faster, therefore consumes a little bit more power. In fact, I would argue that probably on this chart, it's actually more efficient.
一人之下。出现在 E 核上，这次 A19 的 E 核频率提升到了差不多2.
So the E-cores are faster clocked. Again, this is a less than 10% increase. Don't forget that they're using Orion here at 2.4 gigahertz. Isn't it? Oh, that's the lowest clocked one, right? But shouldn't you have that at like 3.6 results too? I'm a little bit confused by the clock speeds they're using. Okay, I'll take it as such, I guess. But yeah, you can see that at 2.4 gigahertz, so at a lower clock speed, it gives you less performance at way higher power consumption. In fact, if you look at it versus the A18 Pro even, right, it gives you like what? 15% more performance for 50% higher power consumption. In fact, more than 50%, closer to 60%. This is a monumental difference in efficiency, and this is why Apple can, in some cases, use a less than 5,000 milliamp hour battery and beat devices that have like 7,000 milliamp hour batteries. Yeah, here we see a massive gain in performance, the fastest E-core, which should actually make it very usable in gaming. So if developers actually maybe specifically optimize for the A19 Pro, they could specifically put tasks on the E-cores that previously might have been reserved for the P-cores, or on the E-cores what was previously reserved on the E-cores. So big performance increase. I believe what 29% they claim.
2.4G 赫呢小幅提频 A19 Pro 的小核比
29% increase at 0 extra power consumption. In fact, power consumption actually goes down. And the reason here why we are probably not being impacted by the power consumption of the memory is because very likely the E-cores can just be happy with the L2 cache that's gotten 50% larger, the system level cache. They don't need the bandwidth of the fast memory. So in that case, the memory can either be state clocked lower or in some case barely be activated at all. So, and in fact, yeah, we see that actually also. What's surprising to me here is the super high power consumption of the 16 E-core, while the A19 really goes down here, which really shouldn't be the case. So I wonder, again, this is also a problem with Spec 2017 because this test takes so long to run. I wonder how often they ran it to compensate for potential issues. But the E-cores on the A19, which have less cache to utilize than the ones on the A19 Pro, them using like half the energy of the E-cores on the A19 Pro for almost the same performance, which by the way, this combination of results, 0.5 for 6, which would be like 12x here, right? You see some cores are in reverse in this chart, right? They have 1 watt for 6.7, so that's a 6x. So yeah, or even here, even worse, right? This is like a 4x calculation, so you get like 4 points per watt. This is crazy pants results. I'm not sure if this is correct.
18 Pro 整数提升了29%，浮点部分提升了22%。更恐怖的是，新小核的功耗并没有变得更高啊，也就是说，这20%多的性能提升是在完全没有提升功耗的前提下带来的。那如果换算成 IPC 提升幅度，整数 IPC 提升了21%，浮点 IPC 提升了14%啊，综合下来呢，提升了17%啊！哇，这个小核到底施了什么魔法啊？那如果我们把这颗 E 核和其他几块 SoC 的小核放在
This is also the benefit of not doing too many E-cores, though. You can make maybe them a tiny bit larger, make them a little bit more cache rich, and make each individual core better rather than spreading out the workload over cores that might not even be needed. That's Apple's approach to 4 E-cores on the iPhone, 6 E-cores on the iPad. And why the Snapdragon 8 Elite with its 6 E-cores? Oh, they're actually using one with 9600 megatransfers memory. The Dimensity 9400 here uses 1067. That's actually interesting. I thought that the vast majority of 8 Elite devices use 10667 megatransfers memory. But obviously all of it is faster than the memory on like the iPhone 8. On the iPhone 16 Pro with LPDDR5X 7500。
在能效曲线上，我们就会得到这样的结果。今年小米玄界 O1 的 A725凭借着优秀的后端设计，在低频能效上给我留下了深刻的印象。眼看着 A18系列的小核要被赶上了，于是啊，我们就迎来了这 A19系列的王炸小核。从能效曲线上来看，这代小核的能效简直强到吓人。功耗又低，性能又强。
Yeah, and also this is them not actually being able to test the E-core right at a lot of different frequencies. Imagine what happened thanks to it now being on like N3P if they reduced the clock speeds by like 10%, right? That's really frightening.
这让我很想知道这个小核里到底做了什么。所以这几天
I mean, it's more cache predominantly, but it's also a wider decode, and I think they'll mention that now.
仔仔细细的分析了它的架构变化，先给你们看看完整架构图啊。那这次 A19的小核可以说是一颗完完全全的全新架构小核，它不同于前代的简单超频。
Which is interesting because I don't believe Apple actually internally refers to it under a new name. I think they're just calling it the same name as like 3 generations ago and call it like the fourth version of that.
这一代的小核在核心规模上有了实质性的提升。首先最直观的是前端的解码单元从前代的5宽直接增加到了
Okay, 5 to 6 Y decode up front. That makes sense.
相应的呢，整数部分的 ALU 执行单元也从3组 ALU 提升到了4组 ALU。
3 ALUs to 4 ALUs. Okay.
那这样一来呢，就已经显著的增加了整数部分前后端的吞吐量，也就显著的提升了整数部分的 IPC。浮点部分的 scheduler 呢，深度明显变大，这次的新架构还把整数和浮点的物理计算器合二为一了。那这样一来啊，如果整数或浮点中单一种类的指令占比比较高
Yeah, I mean, you can see all of these things in the graph. I'll not pretend to be an expert on every individual portion of the compute pipeline here. It makes sense, specifically the decode, the LUs, but then even here, like LDQ, these are not terms I'm too familiar with. The register file, that makes sense to me.
总的可用的计算器数量就更大了。这意味着这时候呢，你就有了更大的乱序执行窗口，进一步提升性能。再加上 ROB、PRT 深度的提升以及仿存队列的提升，进一步加大了整体的乱序。
Interestingly, with out of order execution, they are now obviously doing more and more tricks to kind of like predict what is happening on your chip. That's kind of what can actually result in security issues for your processor, and this is partially why Apple is implementing this new memory securing technology that's part of the ARM instruction set, but not everyone is utilizing it. In fact, beyond the Google Pixel chips for like the last 2 years, I actually don't know who else does it.
总的来说，这颗小核
and this is not saying, oh, I'm definitely sure that the D9400 or the 8 Elite are not using it. I'm actually interested. Let me know if you know if they utilize that.
比前代的小核规模更大、更宽，吞吐量更高，乱序窗口也更大，因此啊，获得这样的性能提升也就并不意外了。最难得的是，在这样的性能提升幅度下，在频率更高的同时，功耗居然没有上升啊，这是非常了不起的水平。可以说，苹果的 E 核在这一代
This is why it's always easy to say, just give us wider decodes, give us more registers, give us more ALUs and shit like that, give us faster memory, or just give us more cache. And it all sounds like it should be a guarantee for lower power consumption, but it's often not. Especially if you make the chip too large, then there's also like an idle power draw of each transistor that's not even being utilized. You have to create a larger like memory controller, bigger access to cache. There more energy will get lost potentially in basically the transport of data at that point. So this is why the E-cores remain so tiny, and even if they get larger, Apple very much focuses architecturally on them suddenly not consuming way too much additional power.
到了 A14 和 M1 以来最大幅度的加强。
But what's interesting is they are talking a lot here about the Pro, but I would argue if they analyze this result, right, their heads would explode, right? We have almost 20% higher results from 5.03 to 5.96, and then this monumental power reduction of 0.92 to 0.49. This is like we're literally talking double the efficiency, right? Beyond that, actually. We're looking at like a 90% performance increase. We're looking at like a 90% power increase to give you actually like 20% less performance. This is insane. Is there a faster RAM for them to use? No, like there's only 10,667 megatransfers per second memory. The question is, can you even build a memory controller that perfectly utilizes it on like a mobile chip without, like maybe if Apple gave it like 8 GPU cores, maybe at that point memory this fast would start making sense. But don't forget, Apple also gave us a faster system level cache, and system level cache is basically indirectly GPU bandwidth. So it's not just the increase from 7500 to 9600, it's also the increase from 24 megabytes of system level cache to 32, and it's the increase of L2 cache from 4 megabytes to 6 megabytes. The backside power delivery should help with that at 16A. Yeah. Definitely. This is why I have talked about on this channel about about Apple potentially skipping N2P and instead being the first adopter of 2 nanometer, while everyone is aggressively jumping on N2P, but then Apple is basically left to be the first adopter of 16A or A16, I forget which is used by Intel and which one is used by TSMC. But again, this is purely speculation. I obviously don't have any insider knowledge of the next nodes that are going to be utilized.
那 Peak 的架构同样也有更新啊，虽然更新幅度没有一核这么大啊，整体的前后端规模呢依然保持在了前代的水平。那它的主要变化呢在于进一步提升分支预测能力，仿存单元的队列
More branch prediction makes sense. Apple actually mentioned that on stage.
更多的仿存指令，
More
提高了
memory
缓存未
access.
命中时候的容忍度。
Yep.
那相应的呢 ，LV 重排序缓冲区和 PRRT 深度也增大了，这意味着整颗核心的乱序窗口的增大。而且这一代 CPU 还有一个非常重要的提升部分，那就是缓存与内存。这代 CPU 我在测试 Spec 2017的时候就观察到啊，对缓存敏感侧向提升是非常显著的，所以我们就带着问题测试它的缓存和内存，最后呢果然得到了有趣的结果。先来看看缓存，那这次发布会里呢，苹果提到了 A19 Pro 里1核的末级缓存提升50%，那我们就先测试了 A19 兄弟的1核 L2 缓存容量 ，A19 和 A18 Pro 的1核 L2 缓存都还是4颗核心共享4兆 L2，那么 A19 Pro 的小核呢就直接增加到了6兆 L2。除了 CPU 的 L2 增大 ，SLC 大小方面呢 ，A19 Pro 也从前代的
So system level cache is basically Apple's L3 cache. And it's the last level cache kind of on the system. It's the one that's, unless you consider memory cache, which it technically is, but also very much isn't. So 33% more system level cache, very good to feed the GPU with it. Hope we are in time to get N2P next iPhone. I think that some people have said specifically that it's N2, that Apple is basically the only user of N2, similar to how they were the only user of N3B.
4兆增加到了32兆，但 A19 的 SLC 则依然延续了 A18 的12兆啊，那这一刀还是不小的。那在进一步测试之后，我们发现这一代的缓存不仅仅是变大了而已啊。带宽测试当中 ，A19 Pro 的 P 和 L2 缓存部分的带宽也有了显著的提升，并且我还有一个意外的发现啊，就是 A19 Pro 的内存带宽显著要
faster clock memory and faster and better cache. That's a lot more bandwidth.
比 A19 高啊。那这意味着什么呢？这意味着 A19 Pro 大可的内存是 LPDDR5 插9600，而 A19 的内存呢是 LPDDR5 插8533啊。那当然呢，它们都要比前代的 LPDDR5 插7500高啊。但显然 A19 Pro 的峰值带宽高不少，这也就是前面说到的 A19 Pro 功耗显著更高的。
True, but that power consumption should not be attributed to the P core itself. That's very much also connected. Like if it's the exact same results, I promise you it will not consume more power in most regular use cases. It's really more these artificial benchmarks that try to peg the core, the memory, the cache behind it. This is why they run something like Spec 2017, because it's designed for such testing.
那总的来说呢，这一代尤其是 A19 Pro 的内存与缓存系统有相当大幅度的提升。那 A19 Pro 这个缓存啊，下料也太粗了，这简直就是 A19 插 3D 啊！这也是 CPU 性能和能效进步的幕后功臣。那如果说 CPU 的提升是平稳迭代啊，那这代 GPU 啊，可真就是大跨步的向前飞跃。
And again, the SLC is also part of the GPU improvement. It's not just the CPU.
先来看常规测试 3D Mark SNL 里的结果。
Still no Met Light. Thankfully, no 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme. You can also see, by the way, how these results have completely nothing to do with the results in actual real-world games, where the 8 Elite and the D9400 very rarely outperform the A18 Pro outside of actively cooled variants, which, I mean, they are kind of doing the active cool. Okay? Oh my god, it's my breath or my tongue that can mute me. I certainly didn't, like something, or I just muted myself, but like for a millisecond, and I saw it happen real time. Is it, did I spit on it and mute myself? Is that what's happening? That's disgusting.
所有的对比机型
Under forced cooling, okay, yeah. So that actually then makes sense. Under forced cooling, these results do make sense to me, because these results do not make sense for a smartphone. Because when you look at the power consumption later on, you'll find that you would never actually run the devices like consistently under that maximum speed.
情况下 ，A19 Pro 的峰值成绩比 A18 Pro 直接高出了40%啊！A19也比 A18 Pro 提升超过了20%，这是自 iPhone 13系列的 A15处理器以来代际提升幅度最大的一代。A19的峰值成绩基本上和8 Elite 与9400持平，而 A19 Pro 则轻松干掉了2款安卓老旗舰。我们来看看完整的能效曲线。那么通过 Xcode 设定不同的 condition。
Okay, this is where I do not rely on this because look at these power consumption numbers, right? When do you think your A19 Pro is hitting 13 watts in just testing the GPU? Games that are a combined CPU and GPU usage max out at like 6 watts. So where these chips perform on the graph around here is actually way more important than how they perform anywhere beyond here. After 8 watts, all of this is completely worthless data. Because, like, look, maybe that will matter if once Apple puts like an A18 Pro or an A19 Pro inside like a MacBook. But yeah, for a smartphone, these results are completely worthless. Geekerwan should release their own coolers. I mean, that would just be a marketing stunt. Like they're not testing in like in a way that like makes the phone portable, right? Do they not like mount it to a bench that's connected to like a liquid nitrogen cooler? I thought I remembered that video.
我们就能画出 iPhone 的
I need subtitles again.
CPU 能效曲线了。那 A19 基本上和天玑9、天4完全重合，而 A19 Pro 则在 SNL 的能效里拿下了榜首。
Again, I know it's here. It is the most energy efficient test, but again, these numbers they mean nothing. This is why I'm telling you, I'm not an Apple sheep. I'm not gonna use these numbers to say, look how good Apple is. Look how much more it delivers you than the Snapdragon 8 Elite at what is this number here? Snapdragon 8 Elite here at 11.5 watts, it gives you 400 points more, 300 points more, and still no matte light. No, I'll just tell you these numbers are worthless because I'm honest. I don't care that the iPhone wins here, just as I won't care once the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 ultimately overtakes the A19 Pro. What matters are real-world performance.
18 Pro 与 A17 Pro 的代际提升。很明显啊，这次 A19 Pro 的 GPU 提升幅度相当之大，至少呢已经完全补足了以往 GPU 的短板，终于暂时性的拿下了榜首的位置。但现在高通和发哥的2个新旗舰也已经
Well, the D9500 promises like 9% more efficiency per frame. So anybody who promised that and 20% more raster, they do promise 2 times more ray tracing. But anybody who believes that the C1 Ultra, the successor to the X95, suddenly gonna, or in this case, the G1 Ultra, the successor to the Immortalis G925 GPU, if anybody thinks this is actually gonna give you 40% more power, yeah, you should think again.
箭在弦上啊，那究竟谁才是今年的 SNL 能效曲线的榜首？现在可能还说不好啊，但至少啊 A19 Pro 开了个好头，这肯定是个好事儿。那你以为这就完了吗？如果说 SNL 里传统光栅化的性能提升已经足够让人眼前一亮了，那 A19 Pro 的光追性能才真正的是史诗级进步啊
Which is interesting because Apple didn't actually talk about ray tracing improvements on stage. They actually mentioned that for the M4 versus the M3 and for the A18 Pro versus the A17 Pro. But let's have a look at Solar Bay Extreme.
刚好 3D Mark 更新了新的光追测向 Solar Bay Extreme。那这个测试呢，相较于原先移动端的光追测试 Solar Bay 啊，在光追的比重上有了大幅度的增加，增加了大量的光追反射、光追透明材质、光追阴影等等啊。那么 3D Mark 官方公布的数字呢，是这个测向比 Solar Bay 的压力提升了最高5倍之多呀。那这个测试画面呢，显然比 Solar Bay 看起来 RTX 多了，对不对？那 A19 系列呢，在光追项比的测试成绩，相较于前
So again, this is under forced cooling. I cannot, for the life of me, get my iPhone 15 Pro Max to get over 1100 points. So we are looking at a 12 to 15% improvement. I've also the A18 Pro, and these results I am also finding by a lot of regular people to be like around 2000 rather than 2100, and this one around 2200. So clearly the cooling here actually has an impact. But yes, The D9400 actually really needs better ray tracing, and that's the promise of 2 times faster ray tracing would actually make it roughly match the A18 Pro. And given that we actually do not know how well it will scale, given that, for example, the 9500 is not capable of using faster memory than the 9400 and 400 plus. It will be limited to 10,667. And ray tracing loves memory bandwidth. Apple gave their chips more memory bandwidth. This is 6400 megatransfers per second. This is 7500 megatransfers per second. This is 8533 megatransfers per second. This is 9600 megatransfers per second. Of course, we've discussed the bandwidth of the cache in play, which also has gotten a lot faster. I'm not sure if these advancements are going to be happening for these chips to suddenly catch up to this. What I also should note, and now again I'm trying to be as anti-Apple fanboyish as I can, these results barely matter for the A-series chips because barely any games on mobile use ray tracing, much less the kind of super intense ray tracing that we see in Solar Bay Extreme. However, to all the people who have used regular Solar Bay results to claim how much faster the 8 Elite or the D9400, they even fooled me to tell me how much better these chips are at ray tracing. I don't believe you. Yeah, you were completely wrong. The iPhone here is basically like, it has at least a 40% better raster to ray tracing ratio versus the 8 Elite. So that's why it gets 2 times faster ray tracing, while it gets roughly in that test it got roughly 20% larger, better raster. So that's more of a 50% increase. And more of actually like actually it's more like a 70% increase. In terms of ray tracing to raster ratio. That being said, I also don't believe the Steel Nomad results that fully, because again, this is under forced cooling. This is making the results less representative of the real world. I would love to know the power consumption numbers. And guys, I did promise you in the beginning of the video that we might react to SuperSaf's camera comparison, but to be quite honest, I do not want to stream longer than 2.5 hours today, and we still have 20 minutes of the video, so unless we can entirely cut off like the last third, I'm not sure. So please, if you're watching and you're enjoying this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, comment live, let me know what you think, and comment, please, especially you, Riley, who you love Big Mark, which you got in the beginning of the stream. Please also comment afterwards. That helped tremendously with the algorithm.
现在的 A18 系列都获得了超过50%的代际提升幅度啊！相较于另外2位对手，它的光追性能简直不像一个时代的产物。考虑到 A 系列处理器的 GPU 架构也要用在 M 系列处理器里 ，Apple 大力提升光追性能也确实是在情理之中啊。那我们再来看看，如果它和一些 PC 级的 GPU 比，表现又如何呢？令人意外的是 ，A19 Pro 啊，甚至在 Solar Bay Extreme 里干掉了 M3啊，非常接近 Lunar Lake 的258V 核显，距离 M4 和笔记本的 RTX 2050并不遥远。要知道，未来
should be noted, the RTX 2050 is actually part of the RTX 3000 family. Technically, this name was just used to make it look cheaper. Wait, is that the mobile part, right? Wait, was there even a desktop RTX 2050? RTX 2050. I thought the 2050 only existed as a mobile part. It's like a rebranded. Change to English. RTX 20. Yep, it's only the mobile version, and it's a successor to the GeForce 30 mobile. Okay. And the architecture should be Ampere, if I'm correct. Yes, it's Ampere and Samsung 8nm. So it's actually technically part of the RTX 3000 series, but they basically didn't want to call it the RTX 3040. So they called it the 2050 mobile. This is the stupidest branding. That's because they just didn't want to make something that sounded that much worse than a 3050. Where even is a 3050 in here? 3050. Really? It would be that much faster, or am I just losing track of it? But yeah, now you basically know. And KSB, yeah, you're confirming for me. There's no desktop version of this part.
M5 的 GPU 那就是 A19 Pro 的2倍啊，所以这意味着 M5 的光追性能也会有一个巨大的提升幅度。
And don't forget, there is a small chance that the M5 suddenly gives us 12 GPU cores rather than 10, so it doesn't even need to scale cache as much, like system level cache, as the A series chips, because it just would have like more tile memory, for example, from having more GPU cores. Plus, in terms of memory, the uplift would actually be similarly fast because the base M4 used 7500 mega transfers. I doubt that the M5 just won't inherit the straight 9600 from the A19 Pro. Mega transfers.
甚至有希望干掉。
Oh, wait, I actually don't think that it's even me with the microphone. I think that the surface of the touch pad, basically that mutes and unmutes, was a little bit dirty, and that results in sometimes like accidental touches. Because I literally saw it turn off, then I turned it back on, and then it turned itself back off right away. And now that I've cleaned it, it's not doing that. So maybe it's not even the position that's to blame?
桌面版的3050，这对于 M5 这种轻薄本的 GPU 来说，应该是个非常大的好消息。那 A19 系列的 GPU 这么强，它到底做了什么呢？要知道 A19 Pro 的工艺也不过就是从 N3E 升级到 N3P 啊，甚至于 GPU 的规模也并没有增加。那这样的工艺升级啊，显然是没法带来这种幅度的提升。那么它到底做了什么？其实发布会上的这几行小字就是问题的答案了。刚开始看到这样的提升，我第一反应肯定是它的浮点算力肯定提升了，那不然怎么会有这么大的提升幅度呢？所以我们就设计了一个测试来看看它的。
20. Okay, so it's just basically faster clocked. I also doubt the problem is if the mic cable doesn't work, then why would it go into mute mode rather than turning itself off? If the connection was unstable, I would understand that, but then I would expect that touch surface to actually go dark rather than red. Especially since it's bright red, so it's actually consuming more energy. Is it like a connection? Oh, it could be another issue. It's connecting through my Ethernet adapter because of how I reposition the table. That could be it, actually. And yeah, Riley, which genius made the touchpad? That's Shure. That's one of the leading brands in microphones for podcasters. One of the leading brands for prosumers. Yeah, the touchpad itself is still stupid, but I think the problem is that I'm not directly connected USB-C to USB-C to my Mac. I think the problem is that I'm connected through an intermediary. That could be causing some issues, even though it hasn't caused it during what is now 12 hours of streaming content ever since the iPhone 17 was introduced.
单精度吞吐量，结果很快我就被打脸了。虽然不能说完全没有提升吧，但是这个区10%的算力提升，显然无法带来这样的图形性能进步啊。倒是在测试过程中，半精度 FP16 的吞吐量翻倍了，这个和发布会说的一样。
Yeah, double the FP16. That makes sense. Apple still does not like to go dual issue FP32 the way that like Nvidia has done in other companies.
我猜测呢，这可能是为了接下来 M 系列出一些更强的 AI 能力所做的准备啊。那不仅如此 ，A19 Pro 还有果味 Tensor Core。
Fruity Tensor Core? What? Is that homophobic? Or is that just a translation that's
它的
homophobic?
GPU 也加上了神经网络加速单元，这意味着果味 TLSS 就是 MetalFX 的性能和效果。
That's correct. That's actually really smart, and this shows that they actually understand the technology. I think that this is the primary reason. While I think that AI acceleration for just pure like large language models makes sense to benefit from the GPU, but the neural engine is actually still faster. So if they just wanted more AI compute on their chips, they would have just given us a larger neural engine. But I think that they didn't want to waste die space because well, A&E is not as versatile as the GPU or the CPU, but they also wanted to have directly integrated into the GPU pipeline neural acceleration that in game simultaneously could process the actual raster or ray tracing of the game, but then also the Metal FX AI pipeline. So that's upscaling, denoising, frame generation thanks to Metal 4.
可能得到比
Makes
较大
sense.
幅度的进步。但这些都还没能解释为什么这一次的图形性能进步这么大。实际上，这里面有相当大的贡献来自于一行不起眼的小字儿，也就是第二代动态缓存技术。在 A17 Pro 和 M3那一代啊，苹果的 GPU 引入了动态缓存技术。那为什么要引入动态缓存呢？首先 ，GPU 在运行着测器代码的时候呢，要先预估着测器代码的寄存器需求。那 GPU 呢会根据寄存器需求，在尽可能不溢出物理寄存器文件大小的情况下，多发射线程。但问题是，如果有一个寄存器压力非常大的线程组，那么在没有动态缓存的 GPU 里，调度器呢可能会给这个线程啊分配巨大的寄存器。但我们要知道啊，光追其实在很大程度上它并不是一个十分适合并行处理的负载。
Well, yeah, because the problem is the more ray tracing you do, even on a super fast device, at that point you have to do it with the way that like your light just goes back and forth, like ray bounces it's called, right? The more bouncing you have, the more precise your ray tracing is. However, literally this process of having that ray bounce back and forth to give you that detail, for example, like overflowing color, like if you have like a light source that like maybe directly shines onto one wall, because it's like a directional light source, that will never stay limited. That color will never stay limited to just a wall. The reason why I'm doing this, by the way, is because there's a wall next to me. You guys cannot see that. Well, maybe you can actually. Barely, now that I'm looking at my own stream. And the problem is, and that is partially why a lot of ray tracing is pretty low quality these days, because that extra ray bounce is so computationally expensive that the problem is it does not always give you the greatest benefits. Even though it gives you higher quality ray tracing, it also results in latency in how the image is generated, because that bouncing process has to be computed first. Which means, for example, if you turn that directional light source on in a game, so that means, oh, the light is hitting there. Now we need to compute the bounces of the rays from that. So this is why instead of having 80 ray bounces or some bullshit like that, we have like 2 or 4 potentially. But that is way too, and that's okay to have low latency. But what that results in is very low quality ray tracing, because our world obviously consists of, well, close to infinite amount of rays. And what we compensate for that is by using AI upscaling. But specifically now, after DLSS 3.5, we're using AI-based denoising. Because if we have a low amount of rays cast per pixel, that will result in a pretty noisy image. So we need that AI to fix that up. You will be able to test that once Metal 4 launches on iOS. But if you have an Nvidia graphics card, you can already test that. It's specifically referring to ray traced denoising. It's called ray reconstruction on Nvidia GPUs. KSP saying, I hate the fact that upscaling is becoming a norm because of ray tracing in games. That is becoming, though, the wrong perspective. And that's because DLSS is an upscaler, as is Metal FX, as is FSR. But they're also really good, high quality temporal anti-aliasing solutions. So this in many cases will be better than a TAA that's already built into an engine, or even like TSR that's built into Unreal Engine 5. You will benefit from using DLSS. But even then, you don't necessarily have to use DLSS for upscaling. Sometimes you'll need that if you look at the game like Borderlands, which is Borderlands 4, which is clearly unoptimized. But you can actually use the higher quality version of DLSS, which is DLAA. and that allows you to actually run the game at native resolution and entirely use the AI pipeline for anti-aliasing. So that's to smooth out edged lines and shit like that. Or if that's a little bit, because at that point you're further reducing frame rates, maybe you just use a resolution very close to the resolution you actually want to have. So instead of running your game at 1080p and upscaling it to 1440p, which you might need for performance, but if you just want good anti-aliasing, maybe you run the game at like 1240p and upscale it to 1440p. A lot of people who run games closer to 4K might run it at like DLSS, at least if the game allows to configure that manually, but instead of DLSS quality, which would usually mean running eternally at 1440p and then upscaling to 4K, instead it would you can manually then configure it to run at 1800p, which is, I mean, literally in between 1440p and 2160p, and use that to have much higher image quality, much higher quality even than a native 4K image would, with the temporal anti-aliasing that's built into an engine like Unreal Engine or Unity or Snowdrop or whatever they're called these days. KSP saying you have an RX 6750 XT, so that's now 2 generations old, right? It only supports FSR 3, which doesn't look so good in my opinion. Yeah, forget FSR before FSR 4. Unfortunately, FSR 4 is only limited to the RX 9000 series. So that's the 9070 XT, the 9060 XT, the 9070 non-XT. And that's because the AI compute on previous generation AMD GPUs, you don't have something like tensor cores or like a neural engine, what you have on Apple's SoCs or on Nvidia GPUs. Instead, Nvidia basically relies more on what Apple has done for the AMD relies much more on what Apple has done for the GPU this year, which is to have neural accelerators baked into the actual GPU cores. It's not separate cores. And for years and years, their integrated AI was too slow to run an actual competitor to DLSS 2. DLSS 1 is garbage. Let's not even compare to that. And then especially once we're comparing to DLSS 3 and 4, and nowadays even intermediary solutions like DLSS 3.5, because DLSS 3.5, the reason why I always mention it is because that's the first time I was really wowed by DLSS. It's because you can use ray tracing now. Maybe you previously hit 60 FPS with ray tracing, but your ray tracing actually looked worse than screen space reflections or normal map-based shadows. But now with AI-based denoising, or as Nvidia calls them, ray reconstruction technologies, it looks better. So yeah, this is unfortunately where really Metal FX, FSR 4, DLSS 4 exist in a completely different level of existence than FSR 3, and especially like anything FSR 2 and older. Or to be honest, a lot of the bullshit that like Qualcomm have done with like ASR, I believe they call it, or even like the Windows wide solution that that Microsoft made for only like the ARM CPUs. So yeah, I don't want to downplay your GPU, but unfortunately, yeah, just architecturally, it doesn't handle what Apple's SoC can handle.
因为你想啊，
But
假如说
it has more throughput, obviously, than a base A series or M series chip.
这里有一个慢反射的表面，像这张桌子。那光线呢，在反射之前可能是平行的，但反射之后，它的光路呢就可能会出现各种各样的路径了。那这样呢，就意味着它会出现大量的分支。那如果出现了前面说的情况，最坏的可能性就是一个几乎不执行的分支里占用了大量的集成器，那就造成了非常大的资源浪费。即便你的算力很强啊，你用不上也是白搭。这就是为什么要引入动态缓存。那有了动态缓存之后呢，就可以更精准的预估着色器片段的继承器需求，根据实际的继承器压力来动态调整发射的线程组多少。 这样就避免了这种安全的浪费。那2代的动态缓存呢，我们测下来主要就是提升了预估的准确性，进一步避免过于乐观的寄存器分配啊，进一步减少了整个计算资源的浪费。我们实际使用了一个光追压力非常大的场景来看 GPU 各个单元的占用情况。可以看到，在这个极端的场景下 ，A19 Pro 的光追性能。
So this is the benchmark that I've actually put into my thumbnail because it shows the A19 Pro outperforming the M4, which obviously has 4 more GPU cores. It might have slower memory, but it has double the memory bus, so it still has faster memory bandwidth. Obviously, it has I think they now have similar system level cache. So this was really impressive to me. Now, again, this is their in-house designed ray tracing test. I believe it's based on some version of Unreal Engine, but it does not include hardware Lumen. For more nerdy details, again, go to our Discord. You'll find people like Raphael. You'll find people like Jimmy James. You will even find the original developer of Geekbench over there, sometimes commenting on certain benchmarks. So that's why I left the link in the Discord in the live chat in the very beginning.
甚至能相比 A18 Pro 翻倍啊！仔细去查看资源占用情况，你可以看到 A19 Pro 的光追单元占用率比 A18 Pro 平稳的多啊，整体上的占用率也要更高。那我们也测试了一下 A19 Pro 和 A18 Pro 的 GPU 光追单元本身的性能。那在一个非常简单的场景里，它们的吞吐量其实并没有测出什么区别啊。所以我们估计这次 GPU 光追性能大幅提升，第2代动态缓存技术绝对是。
And the problem with super again, this is why I mentioned like even solutions like AI to help out with that. But the problem with really low quality ray tracing, the way why you don't see Apple focusing on those scenarios that much is because those are close to worthless at that point, right? It's just not going to give you a good image. You're much better off using fallback solutions like screen space reflections or normal maps, cube maps. All is basically at that point better than a really low quality ray tracing solution. This is why a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games that are currently being released actually, because most GPUs don't have the power to handle hardware accelerated Lumen really well. Plus, there are supposedly still some bugs in hardware accelerated Lumen, but they actually use a software solution. One that it kind of accesses the RT acceleration in like AMD and Nvidia GPUs, but it's much less demanding, but it's also much lower qualities. But those GPUs are just much more performant because they suck so much more power than an A series chip or even a base M series chip or even an M Pro chip, right? So this is why an RTX 5080 with the really good RT accelerators might still fall back to software Lumen, but it will have a lot more raster to compensate for that. The real test is Resident Evil 4 and other AAA games. Well, not for ray tracing. They don't actually have ray tracing, but I hope Resident Evil Requiem actually gets ported to iPhone and iPad, because Resident Evil Requiem is getting an Nvidia Switch 2 port. So it supposedly runs at up to like 60 FPS on the PS5, PS5 Pro, and things like that. It has path tracing on PC, so that's the highest quality ray tracing. But then it even has a pared down 30 FPS version on the Switch 2. I would be very excited to see a game like that on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. KSB, I no longer want to upgrade my GPU, especially after all the hassle I had after switching to AM5 regarding RAM instability. Yeah, the early days of DDR5 memory really weren't great. I never went into BIOSDs many times in the entire lifespan of my AM4. Yeah, that's a lot of the performance improvement of Zen 4 was like based on supporting faster memory. Now, of course, if you have like an X3D chip, a chip with 3D V cache, so basically that's cache that's stacked on top of the chip rather than being on die, because there's only so much cache you can fit on the main die without making the main die extremely expensive and uneconomical to produce. Well, that one actually doesn't need the fastest possible, like 8,000, 9,000 memory that you can sometimes get with DDR5 on desktop. You will be fine with like 6400 or something like that.
一个幕后工程。而且第二代动态缓存不仅仅会提升光追的性能，它对整个 GPU 的运行效率都会有比较大的帮助。再加上其他方面的改进，最终性能，它对整个 GPU 的运行效率
Okay, yeah, so that's still no matte light.
都会有比较大的帮助。再加上其他方面的改进，最终就得到了一颗规模相比 A18 Pro 变化不大，但性能暴增的新 GPU 啊。那在 A 系列处理器上，这个新架构已经可以做到这种水平了。那么在 M 系列处理器上潜力啊，可见一斑。如果不出意外的话，下一代 M5 Max 的 GPU 甚至接近5090移动版，也不是什么没有可能的事情。
Absolutely, absolutely. KSP, you're having a 7700X. Okay, so you're not having an X3D. So you are benefiting by using really fast memory on it. But unfortunately, yeah, if you also don't win necessarily the silicon lottery, but even then, like, what's the optimal memory speed actually on the 7700X? Because it's supposed to be like twice the speed of the interconnect, right? But then again, this is the 7700X, so this is, wait, no, it still has the interconnect with the I/O die. Memory speed optimal 7700X. What is it? Which memory speed? Y6000 megahertz. That's the sweet spot. 6000 megahertz allows a CPU's infinity cache, the interconnects that link CPU cores to run at a 1-to-1 ratio, to be more precise at a 2-to-1 ratio, but that's a completely different discussion. Yeah, so 6000, if you actually clock it higher than that, you might run into issues. So, and you might not actually benefit much. So unless your chip clocks really well, and potentially maybe you can even play, that's something I'm actually unfamiliar with. Can you play with the clock speed of the memory controller of the I/O die? So I would just recommend using the non-3D chip at 6000 megahertz, unless you and then it's much more important to look into like your timings, like CL30 and CL32.
那常规的手游二游啊，显然是不太适合测咱们这个 GPU。
No, they actually are. This is my problem, because nothing matters, because nothing else matters, because this is what these chips are being designed for. And this is why I hate when they bring up like 12 watts or 18 watts power consumption for one single component, like the CPU and the GPU, but then a game that's a combined CPU and GPU workload suddenly maxes out at 6 watts. What do I care about those artificial tests if A, I never see those 12 watts in regular testing, and I would never be able to sustain those 12 watts, and third, I never even would want to sustain them, because the device would either be hot, or I would need to have some active cooling connected to it, or it would just drain my battery too much, so at that point I would constantly have to have like an external battery bank connected.
的提升幅度了，因为他们大多吃 CPU 啊，使用的特效呢。
Yeah, and one wonders why Apple optimizes the CPU as well for efficiency and highest possible speeds. That way, maybe they can then give more power to the GPU if a game that's consistently usually CPU limited might be. Might now say, oh, but Apple gives us 2 times more CPU power. I'm happy with that.
也都比较这个移动端啊。那这颗新 GPU 提升最大的意义，还是在这些桌面级的3A 游戏里。
Yeah, that's because these games are most likely to be limited by factors like cache and bandwidth, and unfortunately, we do not see the double FP32, but the double FP16 pipeline, from what I've been told by a few developers, it's Twitter talk, so take it with a grain of salt, is that the better timing, better latency that is used to achieve dual issue FP16 still benefits FP32. So maybe you get like 80% faster FP16 performance here, but then you still get 30, 40, maybe even 50% faster FP32 component.
有很多移植到 iPhone 上的3A 大作了。我们这次就率先测了《死亡搁浅》《生化危机4重置版》和《刺客信条：幻景》。 那这3款 iOS 移植游戏里面呢，死亡搁浅我们通过修改文件解锁画质和帧率，在2340×1080。
So this is them being pretty silly. I would have preferred them testing like you're using a pretty high output resolution with MetalFX performance. You're probably better off using a low resolution with MetalFX quality. But I mean, whatever.
中画质加 MetalFX 性能档位下，前2代的 iPhone Pro Max 啊，不管是 A17 Pro 还是
Okay, so A17 Pro, that's my chip. Limited to 28 FPS. So I assume that this one is 29 FPS average because it just is it more often limited to 30, but then this one is unlocked and it's 47, which is over 50% increase.
A18 Pro 这个帧率呢都勉强接近30帧。那你知道 iPhone 17 Pro Max 的 A19 Pro 能跑多少帧吗？47帧啊，提升超过了60%，这就有点太离谱了吧？这到底是怎么回事呢？查看功耗你会发现，这 iPhone 17 Pro Max 啊，这么大的提升，也不光是 GPU 本身带来的，散热的释放其实也强了很多，从整机持续5瓦多，一下提升到了整机6瓦。那这次新加入的 VC 均热板确实帮
Yeah, this is also even more important. These devices are not just built for the power consumption of the SoC, but also for the power consumption of the Wi-Fi and 5G engine, the display, even potentially switching to use other components like the camera. And if these devices actually ran 12 watts, maybe we could be discussing the true max power of these chips. But the main benefit of these chips is actually the very good mixed use case of like CPU, GPU, and memory, and sometimes neural engine in place. And especially here, they are using MetalFX. So I wonder if the faster neural accelerators also help out by reducing how many milliseconds the compute pipeline of MetalFX even takes up. Riley saying both my chips got crushed there. Wait, don't you have the 16 Pro Max?
其他3A 游戏里的提升也很大。你像《生化危机4》解锁原生 1320P 分辨率，东低画质，帧率优先档 MetalFX。前2代的 iPhone 刚过30帧，而17 Pro Max 这颗 A19 Pro 居然能跑
By
到。
the way, this is great performance to run with variable refresh rate. Like, because here, yeah, variable refresh rate will like not make you feel like will prevent you from like getting screen stutters and whatever. What is that called? Screen tearing. I apologize. But it will not help you to make this actually feel smooth, especially if you're used to 60 FPS or 90 FPS, 120 FPS. This actually will feel just like 60 FPS. Look, I understand maybe the 1% lows are much lower here, but yeah, also the efficiency of A18 Pro here, pretty great. But you can also see A18 Pro not really having a better cooling solution than A17 Pro. At least it's not trying to do. And also iPad mini. Oh, so you have an A17 and an A18 Pro. An A17 Pro and the mini too.
52帧呢，强得多的 GPU， 再加上4.7瓦暴增到6瓦的
But
散热释
hey,
放，
your
性能
iPad
可以说
mini and your iPhone 16 Pro Max are combined faster than the A19 Pro. Maybe you can try that.
直接起飞。包括4颗信条幻景啊，我们甚至可以跑原
That's
生。
Assassin's Creed Mirage, so vision here is the wrong translation. You should never run a game like this at 1320 resolution. You should really run it at 800p.
1320P 分辨率，100%渲染加高阴影，完全不降渲染分辨率。这 iPhone 17 Pro Max 一样能跑30帧啊！这个时候前2代只剩下20帧了，对比下来确实是天壤之别。应该说 iPhone 跑3A 游戏的行为很有趣啊，它不像2游，它会一上来给你干满功耗，而是从一开始就跑在一个相对比较低、比较平稳的功耗下。
Yeah,
这个功耗是编译时设计的。
because that's what optimization is about.
这是由不同机器决定的。那苹果在定这个功耗档位的时候，我想它就已经考虑到了17 Pro 系列更强的散热，专门定了更高的功耗点给游戏用啊。更优秀的散热加上更强的 GPU，
sadly can't sync the chips together yet.
3A 游戏里超过50%的性能提升啊！这个啊，说实话已经远远超过了我对它 GPU 的预期，也远远超过了官网所描述的所谓最高30%的性能提升。A19 系列这个新架构的 GPU 绝对
Well,
是
I
巨
think
大的
they
进步。
do promise like 40% more thanks to the cooling, like, but they don't refer to it as performance in that sense. It's very weird wording on Apple's part.
那么在更有移动端风味的传统手游里面，这一代的 iPhone 表现又如何呢？咱们先来看看综合。
Yeah, the problem is that the problem is I wouldn't even play these AAA games on iPhone. I would probably play them more on iPad if I could, which in that case gets me really excited about like a 2nm M6 iPad. With tandem OLED that hopefully has like 12 GPU cores at the very least and all the cache and memory improvements. Don't forget the M1 that's inside my iPad Pro actually uses 4233 mega transfers memory. So it's actually 42. Wait, what is it exactly? Is it exactly half of 8533 or is it a weird number? No, I think it's 42. No, it's 4266. It's 4266. And that memory actually is now half the memory bandwidth of what you get on the A19 Pro. That's not even to consider the cache improvements that further. Sorry. On the iPhone, like the iPhone 13 Pro Max, that would result in more than double the memory bandwidth, and the 4266 mega transfers memory that's used on the base M1, that one you kind of have to double it because it's using a 128-bit bus versus a 64-bit bus on the iPhone. But now that means that the A19 Pro has more bandwidth than the M1. That's not even to mention the new generations of ray tracing, dynamic caching, mesh shading, all of that stuff. Dual issue, FP16, neural accelerators, all that stuff.
颇高的崩坏星穹铁道啊，那由于新机首发还没有完成适配，非常高档位的分辨率是1920×883，分辨率调到中呢则是1728×795。那它这次的这个非常高档位啊，是介于前代 iPhone 的非常高和安卓机型的非常高之间。
So I guess
分辨率
it just doesn't have like specific optimizations yet from the developer. Not the fanboy games again. Come on, Riley. Yeah, this is one thing that I do find a little bit disappointing. There are some bigger games that they could be testing that are available on iOS and Android. And even recently, like I know Death Stranding, RE4, they're still good games as Assassin's Creed Mirage to test. But for example, just recently we had Hitman being ported to iOS and iPads, and it actually doesn't run too well. It doesn't hit 30 FPS consistently. So I would just love to know if this game can be maxed out at least to 30 FPS on iPhone 17 Pro Max without any tuning, right?
呢，则是稍高于安卓的高和老款 iPhone 的非常高，因此为了可对比性，我们这次把两种分辨率都测了。那为了便于对比呢，我们找来了今年安卓阵营游戏性能的佼佼者，两台1+S5系列的手机作为对比。那另外呢，这次 iOS 26还引入了一个新模式，40英电量。我们也会来看看这个模式对性能表现有什么样的影响。
Okay, that's cool. I actually didn't notice
iPhone
that
17 Pro Max 在开启40英电量。
Like I didn't pre-watch the entire video, but I watched like snippets of it, and I've seen screenshots that people shared with me. I actually didn't know that they tested the impact of adaptive power mode.
30分钟的测试基本上保持了满帧运行，但是关闭40英电量之后呢，后半程就出。
Yeah, again, I really don't care about these tests too much, right? I mean, 17. Because they're not like they don't use the same resolution. One thing that we don't even know about these games half of the time is if they use the exact same sometimes they will use like the same medium settings name or something like that, but then they will actually perform visually differently. We've seen that with Genshin Impact, which, for example, had like the same ultra or whatever settings, but in that it had significantly different level of distance handling, LOD, on the iPhone, where you could see shadows like literally like twice further away from you than you could on the Android devices back in the day. So I'm not saying that every developer is like using different names for the same settings or the same name for different settings across iPhone and Android, but these tests are not that as good as they pretend they are.
出现了掉帧，那两台小机型呢就没有这么尖头。
Oh, sorry, I still need subtitles.
那 iPhone 17标准版呢，最终跑出了57点。
5.23. We see way better efficiency across the board for the iPhone. The frame rate here, now I know some people will be like 59.6, 59.8 versus 59.0. That very much also is depending on how your phone treats like frame time consistency and stuff like that. Oh my god, I cannot believe it just happened twice. I'll definitely be disconnecting my microphone from my accessory. Good to know that this is happening. Thank you guys for calling my attention to it. But now I'm half paranoid and half looking at my microphone all the time.
6帧的平均帧。令人意外的是 ，iPhone 17 Pro 反而帧数更低，只跑出了55.7帧。那关闭了自适应电量之后呢，平均帧提升到了57.3帧。那有 VC 均热版的 iPhone
Oh, so they first tested in adaptive power mode? Why?
Pro 温控出奇的保守，游戏中全程功耗仅有不到5瓦，没有 VC 均热版的标准版 iPhone 17反而更高啊。那查看机身热成像，不难发现这 iPhone 17 Pro 明显是热量分布更均匀。
Okay, power consumption, heat distribution is more even. Is it actually the coolest device on testing? The 9400 here pushes the Ace 5 Ultra into 47.3 degrees territory? This is insane bullshit. Why? Why would you want that? I mean, the iPhone 17 does not do a terrible job here, but yeah, obviously here the heat dissipation is quite even, but it's also just very hot, right? So these devices are thoroughly heat soaked. Around, but that's because the heat hasn't yet started like heating up much of the rest of the device. Like here it's happening a bit more. And then yeah, on the Pro Max, it's just completely like most of the device is super cool. So if you keep your fingers under the plateau, you'll actually have a really comfortable experience. Yeah, my mic is now officially trying to just stop working.
但机身表面最高温度在开启自适应电量时呢是
I need subtitles again.
41.5度，关闭时更是低的夸张啊，只有40.2度。要知道，机身表面温度对性能释放的影响是巨大的。我完全不明白为啥 iPhone 17 Pro 的温控策略会这么保守，把分辨率拉高到非常高。
I mean, part of it is that the iPhone 17 Pro has only 4,200 milliampere hours. Even on the international version, it's like under 4,000 for the version that still has the SIM card tray. So Apple doesn't want to have too crazy. So your battery life doesn't just simply end.
档位，3台新 iPhone 的分辨率介于老 iPhone 和安卓旗舰之间。此时 iPhone 17 Pro Max 平均57.1帧，测试全程的平均功耗来到了5.8。
Okay, so it has faster. Okay, yeah, this is just ridiculous. 9 watts of power consumption, 8 watts of power consumption. This is gonna make any device hot, even like that isn't actively cooled, right?
83瓦，机
A vapor chamber distributes heat. It's not gonna cause the heat to just like not be there. That's why this is 47 degrees. This is why the 16 Pro Max, because it doesn't dissipate its heat evenly, that one can reach 47 degrees. But actually, if you keep your hand away from that, at least you don't have a super hot device everywhere.
那最高温度是44度，关了自适应电量之后呢，帧数降低到了56.6帧，全程功耗降低到了5.22瓦，机身表面温度只有42度。
I assume that, yeah, okay, so they turned off the adaptive power mode and that resulted, okay. Yeah.
iPhone 17 Pro 在开启自适应电量的情况下，帧数就不如关闭自适应电量了。但是和之前一样，它的机身表面温度始终偏低啊，也是只有42度。
That's good. That's very comfy to hold, especially on aluminum.
iPhone 17标准版在更高分辨率下，同样没有和 Pro 版本拉开差距。同样是更高的机身表面温度和更高的测试全程平均功耗。我本以为加上 VC 均热版会让 Pro 系列的性能释放更好，怎么苹果选择的方向是把机身温度给降低呢？那
Because it's a more comfortable experience. It doesn't. It actually gives you way longer battery life while still increasing performance.
这个温控策略啊，多少是
But then on the Pro Max, they did increase it.
有点 on the Apple can do 了。那散热性能改善最大的受益者呢，是在压力巨大的5G 游戏测试当中。那么在5G 30度的崩铁测试当中 ，iPhone 17 Pro 系列在这里提升巨大。iPhone 17 Pro Max 呢，开关自适应电量都可以跑出52到53帧的平均帧，在比16 Pro Max 分辨率更高的同时啊，帧数还提升了10帧以上。这和安卓旗舰比呢，也不落下风，机身表面温度也只有不到45度，这比前代要低不少。
Okay, so it runs cooler at higher resolution and at higher frame rates than the previous generation. That's good.
比两台1加更是要低得多。但对 Pro Max 来说 ，VC 均热板带来的散热提升是很显著的。
It's not just the heat spreader, it's also the aluminum unibody.
两台小机型啊就会比17 Pro Max 稍微弱一些了，但两者的差距也没有想象中的那么大。虽然 VC 均热板确实有效的把热量导了出来，但保守的温控策略依然限制了17 Pro 的发挥。小尺寸的机身也是限制散热的重要因素。明朝的测试当中 ，iPhone 17 Pro Max 同样有大幅度的提升啊，比前代16
waves, right? I recognize the app icon.
Pro Max 平均帧提升幅度达到了6帧。
Okay. 6 FPS more. That's more than let's call it a 12% increase or an 11% increase. It does so actually at almost 10% higher power consumption. So now I'm wondering what's actually the resolution here. Doesn't seem like the resolution is higher. So this result is actually less representative of the improvements of the GPU. That's actually interesting. But this also isn't representative of the improvements of the CPU. Because it leaves everything on the table. It leaves the efficiency improvements of the CPU on the table, the efficiency improvements of the GPU. What is this game doing? I need subtitles again.
跑到接近6瓦，而此时机身表面温度仅有42到43度，这远低于前代。显然，这个散热提升很显著，而17 Pro 的成绩呢，依然和17标准版拉不开差距。那这里啊，17 Pro 的温控策略同样是非常的保守，机身表面温度啊，不管是哪个模式，都比17标准版普遍低了1度左右，平均功耗呢则保持一致，最终两者的性能也并没有拉开差距啊。所以我还是不理解为什么 iPhone 17 Pro 的温控策略如此之保守。反过来想啊 ，iPhone 17标准版还挺让人惊喜，它的游戏性能可以说几乎和17 Pro 没啥区别。那整个游戏测下来呢，降亮度的频次呢也比以前有了很大程度的改善。iPhone 17 Pro Max 基本发挥出了 A19 Pro 加 VC 均热板的实力，但是温控还是比较保守。
Again, and this is also why this has nothing to do with actual heat dissipation capabilities. This is still software tuning. Also, I would argue this device has no ability to actually use 8 watts if it results in a 48-degree warm body. At that point, it's just so uncomfortable, impossible, that it completely fails the mission of being a smartphone. Okay, my microphone is now acting up more and more.
至于17 Pro 啊，这个温控策略实在是过于保守了，导致它甚至没能跟 A19 加缺少均热板的 iPhone 17标准版拉开差距。这是我测试之前没想到的结果。不知道后续的系统更新会不会稍微能再让 iPhone 17 Pro 的性能释放出来一点。
No, please, Apple, don't do that.
至少在首发版本下呢，这个性能释放水平，我觉得是有点太保守了。那看完了游戏测试啊，这 VC 均热板的作用还是非常明显的。虽然整体的温控策略比较保守，但散热的改善你是明显能感受到的。热成像图的热量分布也明显均匀多了。那我就好奇，这套散热方案的热传递效率到底咋样？于是呢，我设计了一个机身温升曲线的测试。我们在机身表面贴了4个热电偶，分别贴在屏幕正面 SOC 的正上方区域、机身边框靠主板的方向，还有机身背面的上侧，还有下侧2个打游戏时会和手接触的部位。那么我们满载运行 3D Mark 压力测试20分钟，来看看25度室温下机身各个点位的温升状态。咱们直接来看结果啊。先来对比这代散热最好的 iPhone 17 Pro Max 和前代的 iPhone 16 Pro Max。那很明显啊，17 Pro Max 的4个点的温升曲线都非常的平滑。
That is why throttling in these benchmarks also happens much more gradually. That's because the cooling is much better maintained and much more gradually.
看到主板的形状啊。那我们仔细分析曲线呢，在测试开始前的3分钟 ，iPhone 16 Pro Max 的边框和机身背面的 SOC 区域的温升曲线非常陡峭，但机身正面和机身下部的温升就非常的缓慢。那 iPhone 17 Pro Max 呢，在这一段下反而是主板对应的正反面。
Yeah, that's because aluminum better transfers the heat.
Yeah. 更低的温升速率呢，其实就对应了更大的热容量。你不难看出 ，iPhone 17
Pro
Max
more difficult to heat soak because it can handle more heat, but it absorbs the heat actually faster.
那么这台 iPhone 17 Pro 系列的内部结构到底有什么特殊之处呢？它的 VC 均热板似乎看起来也不大呀。实际啊，仔细我们来看看这台 iPhone 内部的结构，它的 VC 均热板布置方式还挺特别的。VC 均热板呢，从机身上部的主板上把热量传导出来之后，在 VC 均热板的外边呢是一块用激光焊接的铝板，热量从 VC 均热板上被传递到铝板上，而这块铝板又和 Unibody 的铝机身连接在一起，热量继续从铝板上传到整个机身啊。而 VC 均热板上本身的热量呢还会传。
So if Apple really wants to get more aggressive, they can replace more of this aluminum like intermediary with copper, or they can just increase the size of the vapor chamber, which they would also probably just use more copper in general inside. And of course, they can make the aluminum unibody thicker if they chose to, but that has other disadvantages like reducing radio frequency transparency, things like that, obviously increasing device weight. So yeah, I think this is a very good first solution in this
于是
regard.
热量就从 SOC 当中被分配给了整个机身的各个区域，可以说它的整个机身都扮演着均热的作用。
Correct.
所以说它的 VC 均热板其实特别像塔式散热器的热管，
Correct.
整个 Unibody 铝机身才是真正它的散热片啊。那我们来对比一下 iPhone 17 Pro Max 和安卓阵营性能非常优秀的代表机型一加 A15 Pro。那在测试开始的前3分钟呢，两台机器最热的位置都出现在主板正反面的点位上。但很显然啊，一加 A15 Pro 在一开始的功耗调度上呢就给得很激进。在测试进行180秒的时候呢，温度最高的机身背面上部区域和温度最低的机身下部区域这2个测温点，此时的温差已经达到了将近10度啊，最高点此时已经42摄氏度了。而 iPhone 17 Pro Max 的最高温度区域呢，出现在屏幕正面对应主板的区域，和最低的背面下部区域温差是6度啊，这时候最高点的温度是35度啊。你可以看到两者的性能释放方式差别还是非常。
Yeah, so by the logic of these other manufacturers, this would be like a 9-watt output device. It's crazy to say that, but yes, maybe they would increase the vapor chamber a little bit. But overall, they would just use the fuck out of that aluminum unibody.
明显的。那么在测试的后半段呢 ，A15 Pro 已经开始触发了50度的机身温控保护。那它会先尝试顶到50度，然后呢降频、降低表面温度，反复去重复这个过程，来逐渐找到。
By the way, this is why I also try to tell you that sometimes limiting some behaviors is not bad. This is good, for example, but this is actual like throttling. It's not like, oh, we know that the performance is going to be unstable, so we are limiting it here. Yeah, okay, my microphone is refusing more and more to work with my Ethernet adapter. That's like a multi-port user. It's happening now all the time. Maybe I'll need a new cable. I'll have to check. But the microphone.
而 iPhone 17 Pro Max 均匀升温啊，直到20分钟测试结束之后，机身稳定在正反面主板区域43度，边框和机身下部区域呢40度左右的程度。A15 Pro 则是逐步稳定在47到48度的位置，实现热平衡。不难看出啊，两台机器的散热能力都相当的出色，基本上都已经用上了机身的每个区域来分担 SOC 的热量。但不同的是呢，两者的调度策略完全不相同啊。iPhone 是随着机身温度的升高，逐渐降低发热量，缓慢的达成最终热平衡。
All of that makes
而
absolute
A15 Pro 则
sense.
是用更粗犷的 PID 调节逻辑，去一步一步的逼近最终的目标测试温度。那我们其实这次也测试了前代大大小小各款 iPhone 的温升曲线和 X200S 的温升曲线。那这部分的篇幅已经太长了，那防止大家睡着呢，我就把曲线贴在这里。那感兴趣的小伙伴呢，你可以自己
Yeah, I'll might look into that on like Discord later on.
来截图分析。那反正总体来说啊 ，iPhone 这套 VC 均热板加上激光焊接铝板，再加上 Unibody 一体铝机身的方式，确实散热
Outstanding.
非常
Wow, high praise.
这个散热系统设计让我想起了华为的 Mate 60 Pro 啊。苹果的 VC 均热板的初代产品呢，并没有选择去卷 VC 均热板面积这条路径，而是去做了一个整套的系统的散热方案。那机身散热的能力基本上已经
So basically, he's saying the vapor chamber is not just better cooling, but this is a new cooling solution.
得上。
Because technically, a vapor chamber still acts like the graphite heat pads on top of like the SoC before it. It's the fact that it's integrated with an aluminum unibody that's actually the big change in overall wattage of heat that can be dissipated.
入安卓旗舰了，这本身就是让我非常惊喜的。这次 iPhone Pro 系列在性能、散热和形态上的升级，差点让我们都忘了啊，它的电池其实也已经更大了。iPhone 17标准版这次的电池容量比 iPhone 16标准，很可惜的是，短板追上安卓旗舰吗？我们这引入了高德地图 GPS 导航环节，还大幅加快了机械手的运转，这样从9小时33分钟大幅缩水到了7小时58分钟。那对于重准备 iPhone 17，
So this is the battery life. This is iPhone 17. Where is the iPhone 17 Pro Max? So they give it 9.5 hours, which means it's playing in the ballpark of devices with 6,000 milliampere hours. In fact, when you look actually just a little bit higher than that,
其实这比13香那代
you'll find like devices with with like 7,000. And yes, you'll see significant improvements here, at least according to their testing, versus the 15 Pro, the 16 Pro generations. So that wildly outpace just the increase in capacity.
还要狠呢。那有的同学会关心这个新系统的自适应电。
Okay, I don't really care about too much adaptive power testing. Wait, or was that adaptive power or
这样
without?
模式会影响续航吗？那其实我们在拿到17之前就已经在上一代机器上测了，这续航基本上是没区别的。这个呢其实是挺让我们意外的。不过嘛，这道高一尺，魔高一丈啊！今年的安卓旗舰
Are probably all heading towards
它是个个朝着7、8千毫安时去了。那届时 iPhone 还能不能打赢国产新机呢？
It will beat the Chinese devices too, but that's because silicon carbon greatly underperforms the actual advertised capacity.
我们就拭目以待吧。我们接下来稍微浅谈。
Wait, that included the adaptive power mode? Because the results still look the same to me, so I have no idea what he means by that, or unless he means that, like, wait, what version were they tested on? Yeah, they were all tested on iOS 26. Oh, okay, I guess that was the point. Okay, so these new features have like, these devices of course have like the new adaptive power mode because it's using the neural engine and stuff like that on newer devices. I'm actually not sure which devices overall have the adaptive power mode. Pretty sure my iPhone does, right? Adaptive power mode, iOS 26. Yeah, 17 Pro Max, the 16 family, and the 15 Pros with the A17 Pro chip. Okay, so with a relatively new neural engine and basically full support for Apple Intelligence, so 8 gigs of RAM and stuff like that, then you get adaptive power mode. Guys, I'll try to wrap this up now because I am mildly panicky about my microphone stopping to work finally. I'll completely rebuild this setup. But in movie magic, it will actually look just the same as before. Okay, 26.01 supposedly happening soon. Oh, that's for the camera fix of one of the iPhone Air's issues for like dual recording mode. iPhone 18 Pro might fix iPhone 17 Pro's most polarizing design choice, the glass cutout, bold new color option, the two-tone. Oh yeah, they said that it might be a transparent design, but if you look actually what's underneath it, it's just mostly aluminum unibody plus a hole. So I'm not sure how that would really do well. It would also put the Apple logo in a very weird spot. Half overlap with like the where it half overlaps with like the whole. Okay, my microphone is now officially trying to say goodbye. Okay, there is nothing new in here, thankfully, because I do want to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'll leave this video up as is. I'm trying not to edit any of like the microphone stuff because tomorrow we are already unboxing the iPhone. We are reacting to that, so I want to use the rest of my free time pretty well. That way I can stream for you more, but I will be rebuilding the setup. We'll make sure that everything works better than before. Thank you guys so much for joining. As always, let me know what else you would like to see me cover next. Do all the YouTube jazz to support this channel. And beyond all that, I'll catch you guys next time. Gonna give you big mark at the very end and gonna be tuning out.